Hey, wild hearts. What happens when two sworn enemies can't keep their claws or their eyes off each other? When the scent of your rival makes your wolf howl with equal parts rage and desire. When the last person you should ever trust becomes the only one who can save you. Welcome to a world where pack loyalty means everything, and falling in love with your enemy could cost you everything you've ever known. This is Rival Hearts, where hatred burns so hot it ignites into something infinitely more dangerous. Chapter 1. The scent hit me like a slap across the face, pine, leather, and something wild that made my wolf snarl beneath my skin. I didn't need to look up from the territorial markers I was reinforcing to know who had dared cross into Silverwood territory. Again. Lost, Blackthorn? I called out, not bothering to turn around as I carved another deep gash into the oak's bark. Your pack's boundary is 2 miles east. Or did your daddy forget to teach you how to read scent markers? A low, dangerous chuckle drifted through the forest behind me. Still marking trees like a common wolf, Sterling? I thought the mighty Silverwood Alpha would have evolved past such primitive displays. I spun around, my claws extending instinctively as I faced Damon Blackthorn, 6 feet of solid muscle, midnight black hair, and the kind of predatory grace that screamed alpha from 100 yards away. His amber eyes held mine with the same challenging intensity they'd carried since we were teenagers, and I hated how my pulse quickened under that stare. At least I'm not sneaking around in someone else's territory like a common rogue. I shot back, taking a step closer despite every instinct screaming at me to maintain distance. What do you want, Damon? His lips curved into that infuriating smirk I'd grown to despise over the past decade. Can't a neighboring alpha pay a friendly visit? Friendly? I laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut glass. There's nothing friendly between Silverwood and Blackthorn. There hasn't been since your father tried to steal our water rights and nearly started a war? Damon's voice dropped to a growl, his own claws sliding free. Or since your pack accused mine of poaching when your hunters were too incompetent to track a wounded deer? Heat flashed through me, part anger, part something else I refused to acknowledge. My father was protecting our territory from your family's constant encroachment, and our hunters found Blackthorn scent all over that deer carcass. Circumstantial evidence from a pack that's been looking for any excuse to blame us for their failures. He took another step forward, close enough now that his scent wrapped around me like smoke. Face it, Lyra. Your pack has been losing ground for years. Maybe it's time to accept that Silverwood's glory days are over. My wolf roared to the surface, and I had to fight to keep from shifting right there. You arrogant bastard. Silverwood is stronger than it's ever been. Then why are you out here alone, doing manual labor like a common pack member? His amber eyes raked over me with casual disdain. Where's your beta? Your enforcers? Did they finally realize you're not worth following? I moved before I could think, closing the distance between us in 2 quick strides and pressing my claws against his throat. His pulse hammered against my fingertips, quick and strong, and for one insane moment, I wondered what it would feel like to taste it. Careful, Sterling, he murmured, his voice rough with something that definitely wasn't fear. You're awfully close to starting something you can't finish. Try me, I whispered, pressing just hard enough to draw a thin line of blood. His hand shot up to wrap around my wrist, not pulling away but holding me there, his thumb stroking over my racing pulse. Gladly. The word hung between us like a challenge, and for a heartbeat, neither of us moved. His scent filled my lungs, making my wolf pace restlessly beneath my skin. I could feel the heat radiating off his body, could see the way his pupils dilated as he stared down at me. Then a branch snapped somewhere in the distance and reality crashed back. I jerked away from him, my hand falling to my side as I fought to regain my composure. This isn't over. I managed, my voice shakier than I liked. No, he agreed, his eyes still burning into mine. It's not. See you around, Alpha Sterling. He melted back into the shadows between the trees with that fluid grace that made my teeth ache, leaving me standing there with blood on my claws and my heart hammering against my ribs. I stood frozen until his scent finally faded, then sank against the marked oak with a shaky exhale. What the hell was wrong with me? Damon Blackthorn was my enemy, had been since we were 18, and his father tried to force a merger by arranging a mating between us. The memory of that humiliating rejection still burned. The way he'd looked at me like I was nothing, told his father he'd rather mate with a rogue than tie himself to Silverwood's failure of an heir. But the way he'd looked at me just now, that hadn't been discussed. That had been hunger, raw and undeniable, and it terrified me more than any challenge to my territory ever could. I pushed off from the tree and stalked back toward the pack house, my mind racing. Whatever game Damon was playing, I wouldn't let him win. Silverwood had survived worse than one arrogant alpha with pretty eyes and a god complex. Even if those eyes haunted my dreams and made my wolf whine for things I couldn't name. The forest around me felt different now, charged with an energy I couldn't shake. And as I reached the edge of Silverwood territory, I couldn't help but wonder if this was the beginning of something that would destroy us both. Chapter 2. 3 days later, I was still trying to scrub the memory of Damon's touch from my skin when Marcus, my beta, burst through my office door without knocking. "We have a problem," he announced, his usually calm demeanor cracked with barely contained panic. I looked up from the territorial reports I'd been pretending to read. "Define problem." "The council wants to see you. And Blackthorn. Together. Tonight." My coffee mug slipped from suddenly numb fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor. "What?" Marcus ran a hand through his sandy hair, a nervous habit from our youth. "Apparently, there have been reports of rogue activity along both our territories. The council thinks it's connected, and they want both packs to investigate. Together." "Absolutely not." I shot to my feet, ignoring the coffee spreading across my reports. "I won't work with that arrogant." "It's not a request, Lyra." Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. "Elena Ravencrest herself called. If we refuse, they'll send in their own investigators, and you know what that means." I did know. Council investigators meant external oversight, potential territory redistribution, and the kind of scrutiny that could destroy a pack's reputation permanently. The council had been looking for an excuse to thin out the smaller packs for decades, consolidating power among their preferred few. "When?" I asked through gritted teeth. 1 hour. The old Moonfall Lodge, neutral territory. I closed my eyes and counted to 10 in 3 different languages. When that didn't work, I imagined various creative ways to murder Damon Blackthorn. That helped marginally.
"Fine.
But I want you and Sarah there as backup." "Already planned on it."
Though."
Marcus hesitated. "Lyra, maybe this is a chance to finally put the past behind you. Work together for the greater good and all that." I fixed him with my best alpha stare. "The greater good doesn't erase 10 years of hostility, Marcus. Blackthorn made his feelings about me perfectly clear when we were 18. This is business, nothing more." But even as I said it, I could feel the lie sitting heavy in my chest. The memory of Damon's thumb stroking over my pulse, the hunger in his amber eyes, the way he'd said, gladly, like a promise, none of that felt like business. 40 minutes later, I stood outside the Moonfall Lodge with Marcus and Sarah flanking me, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. The lodge had been neutral ground for over a century, built specifically for interpack meetings and territorial disputes. Its log walls and stone chimney gave it a rustic charm that belied its political importance. The Blackthorn contingent was already there. I could smell them before I saw them, pine and leather, and that distinctive wild scent that belonged to Damon alone. My wolf stirred restlessly, and I had to consciously suppress the urge to shift. They emerged from the tree line like shadows given form. Damon walked point, his dark hair catching the moonlight, flanked by his beta, a mountain of a man named Kane, and a petite brunette I recognized as his pack's tracker, Nora. All 3 moved with the predatory grace of born hunters, and I found my gaze lingering on the fluid way Damon navigated the uneven ground. "Focus, Sterling. He's your enemy, not your entertainment." "Sterling." Damon nodded as they approached, his expression carefully neutral. "Prompt as always. Unlike some packs, we take council summons seriously," I replied coolly. His lips twitched with what might have been amusement. "Noted." The lodge door opened before anyone could escalate the verbal sparring, and Elena Ravencrest herself appeared on the threshold. At nearly 200 years old, she was one of the oldest wolves on the continent and commanded respect from every pack from Alaska to Mexico. Her silver hair was pulled back in an elegant chignon, and her pale blue eyes missed nothing. "Alphas," she greeted, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Thank you for coming." We filed into the lodge's main room, a circular space dominated by a massive stone fireplace. Ancient pack symbols were carved into the wooden beams overhead, and the air hummed with decades of supernatural energy. Elena gestured for us to sit around a heavy oak table, but I noticed she made no move to separate the two packs. "I'll be direct," she began once we were seated. "Over the past month, we've had reports of unusual rogue activity in this region. Lone wolves who attack without provocation, leave no scent trail, and seem to be specifically targeting pack borders." I leaned forward, my attention sharpening. "How many incidents?" 17 confirmed attacks. 8 on Silverwood territory, 9 on Blackthorn. Elena's gaze moved between Damon and me. In each case, the rogues vanished without a trace, leaving behind only destruction and confused witnesses. Damon frowned. "My pack hasn't reported any rogue encounters in weeks. Because your beta has been covering them up to avoid appearing weak," Elena said matter-of-factly. Kane had the grace to look embarrassed. "Just as Alpha Sterling has been handling her incidents privately to avoid council intervention." Heat flushed through my cheeks, but I kept my expression impassive. She wasn't wrong. I had been managing the rogue problems internally, not wanting to give the council any excuse to question my leadership. "The point is," Elena continued, "these aren't random attacks. Someone is coordinating them, and they're specifically targeting your territories. We need to know why." "What do you want us to do about it?" Damon asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Elena smiled, and it was all teeth. "You're going to work together to find out who's behind this. Joint patrols, shared intelligence, coordinated response teams. Whatever personal issues exist between your packs are hereby suspended until this threat is neutralized." "Absolutely not," I said at the same time Damon growled. "Out of the question." Elena's eyebrows rose. "I wasn't asking. This is a direct council mandate. You have 48 hours to present a joint operational plan, or we'll dissolve both your packs and redistribute your territories to more cooperative alphas." The threat hung in the air like a death sentence. Pack dissolution was the council's ultimate weapon, used only when they deemed a leadership completely unfit. It would mean exile for both Damon and me, and absorption of our pack members into other groups. Everything we'd built, everyone we'd sworn to protect, gone. I could see the same realization dawning in Damon's amber eyes. Whatever else stood between us, we were both alphas first. Our packs came before everything, even old grudges. "Fine," I said through gritted teeth. "We'll cooperate." Damon's jaw clenched, but he nodded curtly. "Agreed." Elena's smile turned genuinely pleased. "Excellent. I suggest you start tonight. The next new moon is in 6 days, traditional hunting time for rogue packs. If someone is planning something larger, that's when they'll likely strike." She stood, clearly considering the meeting concluded. "I'll expect daily reports. And alphas." She paused at the door. "Try not to kill each other. It would be terribly inconvenient for the paperwork." Then she was gone, leaving the two packs staring at each other across the table like opposing armies forced into an unwilling truce. "Well," Damon said after a long moment, "this should be fun." I met his gaze across the table, noting how the firelight turned his amber eyes to molten gold. "If by fun you mean a complete disaster, then yes. It should be spectacular." He laughed, a genuine sound that caught me completely off guard. "At least you're honest about it. Most alphas would be spouting diplomatic nonsense about working together for the greater good." "I'm not most alphas," I said, then immediately wanted to kick myself for how that sounded. "No," he agreed, his eyes lingering on my face with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. "You're definitely not." The weight of his stare was becoming unbearable, so I stood abruptly. "We should meet tomorrow to discuss strategy. Neutral ground." "The old quarry," he suggested. halfway between our territories. I nodded, not trusting my voice. The quarry held its own complicated memories. It was where we'd first met as teenagers, before the politics and arranged mating disaster had poisoned everything between us. Dawn, I managed. Dawn, he agreed. As our respective packs filed out of the lodge, I caught Damon's scent one more time, that maddening combination of pine and leather, and something uniquely him that made my wolf pace restlessly beneath my skin. This was going to be the longest 48 hours of my life. And the most dangerous, because somewhere between his challenge in the forest and his unexpected laughter tonight, I was beginning to remember why I'd once thought Damon Blackthorn was worth loving. That was a complication I definitely couldn't afford. Chapter 3. Dawn at the quarry meant mist rising off the still water and the kind of ethereal quiet that made everything feel like a fairy tale. I'd arrived 15 minutes early, partly for strategic advantage and partly because I'd been too restless to sleep anyway. The quarry hadn't changed much in the 10 years since I'd been here last. The same granite walls rose from water, so clear you could see the bottom 30 feet down, and the same fallen logs stretched across the narrow and like a natural bridge. This place held memories I'd tried to bury, stolen afternoons when Damon and I would meet here as teenagers, before everything went wrong. Nostalgic. I spun around to find Damon emerging from the forest like he'd materialized from shadow itself. He was alone, as we'd agreed, and wearing worn jeans and a black Henley that did absolutely nothing to hide the powerful lines of his body. Hardly, I lied, crossing my arms. This was just the most practical meeting location. He stepped onto the rocky shore beside me, close enough that I caught his scent on the morning breeze.
Right.
Nothing to do with the fact that we used to come here to escape our father's political games. I kept my expression carefully neutral, even as memories threatened to surface. Lazy summer afternoons when we'd talk for hours about everything and nothing. The day he'd taught me to dive from the highest cliff. The afternoon when I'd almost drowned and he'd pulled me from the water, both of us breathing hard and staring at each other like we'd discovered something terrifying and wonderful. Ancient history, I said firmly. We're here to discuss the rogue situation. Of course we are. But there was something in his voice, a softness that made my chest tighten. Though I have to admit, I'm curious about something. I should have walked away. Should have steered the conversation back to pack business and kept the careful walls I'd built intact. Instead, I heard myself ask, "What? Why didn't you ever mate?" The question was casual, but his amber eyes were anything but. You're 28, an alpha in your prime. Most pack leaders have chosen partners by now. Heat flushed through me, part embarrassment and part something more dangerous. That's none of your business, isn't it? He moved closer, and I could see golden flecks in his irises. We were supposed to be mated, once upon a time. Before you made it clear I wasn't good enough for the precious Blackthorn heir, I cut him off, old pain sharpening my voice. Before you told your father you'd rather mate with a rogue than tie yourself to Silverwood's failure. Something flickered across his face, regret, maybe, or pain. Lyra. Don't. I held up a hand, stepping back. Just don't. That conversation was crystal clear 10 years ago. No need to rehash it now. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. The words came out harsher than I intended. Your father wanted to absorb Silverwood through a political mating, and you found the idea so repulsive you couldn't even be polite about rejecting it. Message received, loud and clear. Damon ran a hand through his dark hair, frustration rolling off him in waves. That's not what happened. Then what did happen? I demanded, my carefully constructed composure finally cracking. Because I was there, Damon. I heard every word. For a long moment, he just stared at me with those burning amber eyes. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, he said, I was 18 and scared shitless of how much I wanted you. The words hit me like a physical blow. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. What? You want the truth? He stepped closer, his scent wrapping around me like smoke.
Fine.
I'd been half in love with you since we were 16. Every stolen afternoon we spent here, every conversation that lasted until the stars came out, I was falling harder and deeper until I couldn't breathe around you. My heart was hammering so hard I was sure he could hear it. "That's not," you said. I said what I thought I had to say to protect you. His voice was raw now, stripped of its usual arrogant confidence. "My father didn't want a political alliance, Lyra. He wanted to destroy Silverwood from the inside. Use our mating bond to gain access to your territory and resources, then systematically eliminate your pack's leadership." The world tilted sideways. "You're lying." "Am I?" He reached into his jacket and pulled out a yellowed piece of paper, the edges soft with age. "I've carried this for 10 years, waiting for the right moment to show you." With shaking hands, I took the paper and unfolded it. It was a letter in his father's handwriting, addressed to someone named Victor. The content made my blood run cold. "The Sterling girl is perfectly positioned for our needs. Once Damon is mated to her, we can begin phase 2 of the territorial acquisition. Eliminate the father first, make it look like a rogue attack. The girl will be too grief-stricken and dependent on her mate to resist when we suggest merging the packs for protection. Within 2 years, Silverwood will be nothing but a memory, and their territory will be ours." I read it twice, then a third time, the implications crashing over me like a tidal wave. "Your father was planning to kill mine?" "Among others." Damon's voice was thick with old shame. "Your beta, your tracker, anyone who might challenge the merger. I found that letter the night before our fathers were supposed to finalize the mating agreement." "So you..." I looked up at him, seeing the 18-year-old boy he'd been beneath the confident alpha mask. "You said those things to save my pack." "I said those things to save you," he corrected softly, "even if it meant you'd hate me for the rest of our lives." The letter crumpled in my fist as 10 years of carefully nursed anger and hurt began to crumble. "Why didn't you tell me the truth?" "Because my father was still alive, and he was vindictive enough to carry out his threats even without the mating alliance. You needed to genuinely hate me, genuinely believe the rejection was real. It was the only way to keep you safe." I stared at him, this man I'd spent a decade hating, and felt something shift in my chest. The careful walls I'd built around my heart developed hairline cracks, letting in dangerous slivers of light. "Your father died 3 years ago," I said quietly. "Yes. You could have told me then." "I could have." He stepped closer, near enough that I could feel the heat radiating off his body. "But by then, you were established as alpha, strong and independent, and everything I'd always known you could be. What right did I have to waltz back into your life and ask for forgiveness?" "The right of someone who sacrificed everything to protect me," I whispered. The pain in his amber eyes was so raw it made my chest ache. "I didn't sacrifice everything, Lyra. I sacrificed the one thing that mattered most." "Which was?" "You." The word hung between us like a confession. "I sacrificed you." We stood there in the growing daylight, 10 years of misunderstanding dissolving like mist off the quarry water. I wanted to be angry, wanted to cling to the familiar hurt that had shaped so much of who I'd become. But looking at him now, seeing the truth written in every line of his face, all I felt was a bone-deep exhaustion and something dangerously close to forgiveness. "We should focus on the rogue situation," I said finally, though my voice lacked conviction. "Yes," he agreed, but neither of us moved. The letter was still crumpled in my fist, and I could feel its weight like a physical thing. 10 years of hating the wrong person, of building my identity around a betrayal that had never actually happened. The implications were staggering, but there would be time to process them later. Right now, I had a pact to protect and a mystery to solve. Even if the man standing across from me had just turned my entire world upside down with a truth I wasn't sure I was ready to handle. "The rogues," I said more firmly. "We need a plan." "Right." Damon's voice was rough, but he seemed to gather himself with visible effort. "Joint patrols starting tonight?" "Agreed. We'll coordinate schedules this afternoon." "Lyra." He caught my arm as I turned to leave, his touch sending electricity shooting up my skin. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For everything." I looked down at his hand on my arm, then up into his eyes. The boy I'd once loved was still there, buried beneath years of regret and responsibility, and my traitorous heart gave a flutter of recognition. "So am I," I said softly. Then, before I could do something stupid like forgive him completely, I pulled free and walked away. But as I reached the tree line, I could have sworn I heard him whisper, "Maybe it's not too late after all." The thought terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. Because despite everything, despite a decade of hurt and anger and careful distance, part of me was beginning to hope he was right. Even if that hope might destroy us both. Chapter 4. Your left flank is completely exposed. I hissed into the comm unit as Damon's tracker missed an obvious scent trail. Are you trying to get us all killed? Maybe if your people would actually communicate instead of going rogue every 5 minutes, we wouldn't have this problem. Damon's voice crackled back, tight with frustration. We were 3 hours into what should have been a simple perimeter sweep, and already my wolf was ready to murder something. Preferably the arrogant alpha, whose idea of strategy apparently involved charging headfirst into potentially dangerous situations without backup. My people don't go rogue, I snapped, adjusting my position behind a cluster of boulders. We adapt to situations your people are too rigid to handle. Rigid. The dangerous edge in his voice made my pulse quicken. I'll show you rigid. Sarah's voice cut through our bickering with military precision. Contacts, 2 o'clock. 3 rogues, moving fast toward the eastern border. All personal animosity vanished as we shifted into hunting mode. I could see them now, 3 figures moving through the underbrush with the unnatural stealth that had made them so hard to track. They wore dark clothing that seemed to absorb moonlight, and their movements were too coordinated for typical rogue behavior. Take positions, I ordered, then realized I was giving commands to wolves who weren't mine. I mean, good call. Damon's voice was calm and focused. Kane, circle around behind them. Nora, you're with me on the direct approach. Silverwood team, can you cut off their escape route to the river? The easy way he incorporated my pack into his strategy should have irritated me. Instead, I found myself grudgingly impressed by his tactical thinking. Copy that. Sarah, Marcus, you heard him. Move. We spread out like a closing net, years of training taking over as we converged on our targets. But as we got closer, something felt wrong. The rogues weren't running or hiding. They were standing perfectly still in a small clearing, almost like they were waiting for something. It's a trap, I breathed into the calm. I know, Damon replied, but we need to know what they want. Before I could argue, he stepped into the clearing with a kind of confident stride that screamed alpha. The 3 rogues turned to face him, and even from my concealed position, I could see their unnatural stillness. You're trespassing, Damon said conversationally. State your business or leave. The center rogue, a tall man with prematurely gray hair, smiled with too many teeth. We're here to deliver a message, Alpha Blackthorn. My blood chilled. They knew who he was, had been waiting specifically for him. This wasn't a random territorial incursion, it was targeted. What message? Damon asked, but I could hear the tension beneath his casual tone. Your time is up, the rogue said simply. Both of you. The old ways are ending, and you're standing in the way of progress. Whose progress? I demanded, abandoning stealth to step into the clearing beside Damon. His sharp intake of breath told me he hadn't expected that, but I wasn't about to let him face this alone. The rogue's smile widened as he turned to me. Alpha Sterling. Right on schedule. Our employer will be so pleased that you're both here. Who's your employer? Damon moved slightly, placing himself between me and the rogues. The protective gesture sent an unwanted flutter through my chest. Someone who understands that the pack system is outdated, the gray-haired man replied. Someone who's ready to create a new order, with or without your cooperation. And if we refuse to cooperate? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Then you'll be removed from the equation. Permanently. The rogues moved as one, faster than should have been possible. I barely had time to register their inhuman speed before Damon was shoving me sideways, his body colliding with mine as claws raked through the space where my head had been seconds before. We hit the ground hard, Damon's weight pinning me as chaos erupted around us. The scent of blood filled the air. His blood, I realized with a spike of panic. The claws had found their mark, leaving 3 parallel gashes across his shoulder. Stay down, he growled, already shifting partially as his canines extended and his eyes flashed golden. Like hell, I rolled out from under him, my own wolf surging to the surface as I faced the rogue who'd tried to decapitate me. The fight was brutal and fast. These weren't ordinary rogues. They moved with military precision and fought with a vicious efficiency that spoke of extensive training. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd threatened both our packs, which meant Damon and I were finally fighting on the same side. We moved together like we'd been partners for years instead of enemies. When one of the rogues tried to flank me, Damon was there with claws and fangs. When another attempted to overwhelm him with sheer aggression, I slipped behind and went for the throat. It was deadly ballet, perfectly choreographed violence that left no room for doubt or hesitation. Within minutes, 2 of the rogues were down, and the third was fleeing back toward the river with Sarah and Kane in pursuit. Damon and I stood in the clearing, breathing hard and covered in blood that wasn't entirely ours. "You're hurt," I said, reaching toward the gashes on his shoulder before catching myself. "I'm fine." But his voice was strained, and I could see the way he favored his left arm. "You're not fine, you stubborn ass. That needs to be cleaned and stitched. Lyra, don't argue with me." The command came out with full alpha authority, and he actually took a step back, surprise flickering across his face. "My territory is closer. Sarah can handle the scene here." For a moment, I thought he might argue. Then he nodded curtly, and I realized he was probably more shaken by the attack than he was letting on. Someone had put a hit out on both of us, someone with enough resources to train specialized assassins and enough intelligence to know exactly where and when to find us. The walk back to the Silverwood pack house was tense and silent. Damon moved with careful precision, but I could see the way blood was seeping through his shirt and smell the pain he was trying to hide. My wolf whined with distress, wanting to comfort and protect, and I had to consciously suppress the urge to shift and nuzzle against his uninjured side. "Get it together, Sterling. He's hurt, not helpless." But when we reached the pack house and he swayed slightly climbing the front steps, I didn't hesitate to slide under his good arm and let him lean on me. He was warm and solid against my side, and his scent was stronger here, pine and leather with an underlying note of blood and adrenaline that made my protective instincts flare. "Kitchen," I said, guiding him through the main hall. "The light's better there." He didn't argue, which told me he was hurting worse than he was admitting. I settled him at the heavy wooden table and gathered medical supplies from the cabinet, hyper-aware of his eyes tracking my every movement. "This is going to sting," I warned, uncapping a bottle of antiseptic. "I've had worse." I highly doubted that. The cuts were deep and ragged, and I could see bits of dirt and fabric embedded in the torn flesh. But I started cleaning the wounds with steady hands, pretending not to notice the way his muscles tensed under my touch, or how his breathing quickened when my fingers brushed against uninjured skin. "Why did you do that?" I asked quietly as I worked. "Do what?" "Protect me. Push me out of the way." I met his gaze briefly before focusing back on the task. "We're not allies, Damon. This partnership is strictly business." He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with something that sounded dangerously close to vulnerability. "Old habits." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I've spent 10 years trying to forget what it felt like to care about someone more than my own life," he said quietly. "Apparently I'm not as successful as I thought." My hand stilled on his shoulder. "Damon, I know this doesn't change anything between us," he continued, his amber eyes fixed on my face. "I know you have every reason to hate me, and that what I did 10 years ago can't be undone. But seeing you in danger tonight, knowing someone wants to hurt you, it brought back every protective instinct I've been suppressing for a decade." I finished cleaning the wounds in silence, my mind spinning with implications I wasn't ready to examine. When I reached for the needle to start stitching, my hands were trembling slightly. "Let me," he said softly, catching my wrist. "You can't stitch your own shoulder." "Not the stitches." His thumb brushed over my racing pulse, the same gesture he'd made 3 days ago by the territorial markers. "Let me explain what tonight meant. What working with you felt like. I should pull away. Should maintain the careful distance that had kept us both safe for a decade. Instead, I found myself stepping closer, drawn by the raw honesty in his voice. "We fought well together," I admitted reluctantly. "We did more than that." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "We moved like we were meant to be partners. Like we were two halves of the same whole." The needle slipped from my fingers, clattering onto the table. Because he was right, and that terrified me. In the heat of battle, all our history had fallen away, leaving only perfect synchronization and an unshakable trust one hadn't even realized I still felt. "That doesn't mean anything," I said, but the words sounded hollow even to me. "Doesn't it?" He stood slowly, careful not to disturb the half-finished stitches, and stepped closer until I was trapped between his body and the kitchen counter. "When that rogue came at you, my wolf nearly lost control. Not because of some alliance or political necessity, but because the thought of losing you again was unbearable." "You never lost me," I whispered, then immediately wanted to take the words back. His eyes flashed golden. "Didn't I?" The question hung between us like a challenge. I could feel the heat radiating off his body, could see the way his pupils dilated as he stared down at me. My wolf was pacing restlessly, wanting to close the distance between us, wanting to taste and touch and claim. "This is a bad idea," I breathed. "The worst," he agreed, but his hand came up to cup my cheek anyway, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw. "Tell me to stop, Lyra. Tell me to walk away and pretend this conversation never happened." I opened my mouth to do exactly that. The words were right there, simple and safe and sensible. But what came out instead was, "I can't." Something shifted in his expression, relief and hunger and a desperate kind of hope that made my chest tight.
"Good.
Because I don't think I could have handled it if you had." He leaned down slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away, to remember all the reasons this was impossible. But I was tired of being sensible, tired of fighting an attraction that had been simmering for 10 years despite everything between us. When his lips finally met mine, it was like coming home and catching fire all at once. Soft at first, tentative, as if he couldn't quite believe I was letting this happen. Then I made a small sound in the back of my throat, and he deepened the kiss, one hand tangling in my hair, while the other pulled me closer. He tasted like danger and regret, and something wild that made my wolf howl with recognition. This was what I'd been missing, what I'd been denying myself for a decade, the perfect fit of his mouth against mine, the way his scent wrapped around me like smoke, the electric thrill of finally giving in to the connection we'd both been fighting. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. His forehead rested against mine, and I could feel the rapid flutter of his pulse against my palm where it had somehow found its way to his throat. "This complicates things," I said weakly. "Everything was already complicated," he pointed out, his voice rough with desire. "At least now it's complicated in a way that doesn't make me want to put my fist through a wall." I laughed despite myself, the sound shaky but genuine. "You have such a way with words. I'm better with actions." "Are you?" The challenge slipped out before I could stop it, and his answering smile was pure predator. "Would you like me to demonstrate?" Every nerve ending in my body screamed yes, but reality came crashing back as I heard voices in the front hall. My pack was returning from the scene, and the last thing I needed was for them to find their alpha making out with the enemy in the kitchen. "Rain check," I said, stepping back reluctantly. Damon nodded, though the disappointment in his eyes made my chest ache. "The stitches. I'll finish them later. You should go before." "Lyra." Marcus's voice echoed from the main hall. "Everything okay?" "We found some interesting things at the scene." "Coming." I called back, then looked at Damon with something close to panic. "Back door."
"Now."
He was already moving, pausing only to catch my hand and press a quick kiss to my knuckles. "This isn't over." "I know," I whispered. Then he was gone, melting into the darkness beyond my back porch like he'd never been there at all. But his scent lingered in my kitchen, and I could still feel the phantom pressure of his lips against mine. I made it to the main hall just as Marcus, Sarah, and the others came through the front door, their expressions grim. "What did you find?" I asked, hoping my voice sounded steadier than I felt. Marcus held up a small device, sleek and obviously expensive. "Communication gear. Military grade, encrypted." These weren't ordinary rogues, Lyra. Someone's funding them, training them, coordinating their attacks. I stared at the device, my mind racing. Whoever was behind this had serious resources and a specific agenda. The attack tonight hadn't been random, it had been a message. A declaration of war. Any idea who? I asked. Not yet. But we'll figure it out. Marcus's expression softened with concern. Are you all right? You seem… I'm fine, I said quickly. Just shaken up from the attack. It's been a long night. He nodded, accepting the explanation, but I could see the questions in his eyes. Sarah was watching me with similar curiosity, and I realized I probably looked exactly like someone who'd just been thoroughly kissed. Get some rest, I told them. We'll analyze everything in the morning and coordinate with Blackthorn Pack. As my people dispersed, I touched my lips unconsciously and wondered what the hell I'd just gotten myself into. Kissing Damon had been inevitable, I realized now. 10 years of suppressed attraction and unresolved history were bound to explode eventually. But it had also been dangerous. Not just politically, though working with him was complicated enough without adding personal feelings to the mix, but emotionally. Because for those few minutes in his arms, I'd felt like the girl I'd been before everything went wrong. The girl who'd believed in love and happy endings and the possibility of forever. That girl had been naive. This woman knew better. But as I made my way upstairs to my empty bedroom, I couldn't quite convince myself that knowing better was enough to keep me from wanting things I shouldn't want. Things like a future where Damon Blackthorn looked at me the way he had tonight, like I was something precious he'd thought he'd lost forever. Even if that future might cost us both everything we'd spent 10 years building. Chapter 5. I spent the next morning trying to convince myself that kissing Damon had been a momentary lapse in judgment. A stress response to nearly being assassinated. A temporary madness brought on by adrenaline and old memories. None of those explanations made the taste of him any less vivid on my tongue. You're distracted, Sarah observed as I missed an obvious connection in the intelligence reports for the third time. Want to talk about it? Nothing to talk about, I said, focusing determinedly on the papers spread across my desk. I'm just trying to understand the pattern here. She raised an eyebrow but didn't push. Sarah had been my friend since childhood, and my PAX had tracked her for 5 years. She knew when to let things lie and when to dig deeper. Fortunately for my sanity, this seemed to be a let-it-lie situation. The attacks all happened within a quarter-mile of territorial boundaries, she said, pointing to the marked locations on our map. But never in the same spot twice, and never following a predictable schedule. What about the gear Marcus found? Expensive. The communication device alone probably costs more than our entire PAC's monthly budget. Whoever's funding this operation has serious resources. I studied the map, noting the strategic placement of each incident. They're probing our defenses, testing response times, noting patrol patterns. This is reconnaissance for something bigger. That's what I think too. The question is what? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Need to see you. Important information about last night. Usual place, 1 hour.
D.
My heart did something acrobatic in my chest. The usual place could only mean the quarry, and the fact that Damon was texting instead of going through official channels suggested whatever he discovered was sensitive. I need to run an errand, I told Sarah, trying to sound casual. Everything okay? Just pack business. I'll be back in a few hours. The drive to the quarry gave me too much time to think about what I was doing. Meeting secretly with Damon was dangerous on multiple levels, especially after last night's kiss. But if he had information about the attacks, I needed to hear it. I found him sitting on the fallen log that stretched across the narrow end of the quarry, looking like something out of a gothic romance novel. His shoulder was properly bandaged now, and he'd changed into a fresh shirt that emphasized the lean strength of his build. When he heard my approach, he looked up with an expression I couldn't quite read. You came, he said simply. You said it was important. It is. He patted the log beside him.
Sit.
Please. I hesitated, remembering what had happened the last time I'd gotten too close to him. But curiosity won out, and I settled onto the log with careful distance between us. What did you find? Damon pulled out a manila folder and handed it to me. Kane did some digging into our mystery attackers. What he found is disturbing. I opened the folder and immediately understood his tone. The first page was a dossier on the gray-haired rogue who delivered the threats. The photo showed a lean man with intelligent eyes and military bearing, but it was the text beneath that made my blood run cold. Colonel James Harrison, I read aloud. Former Special Forces, dishonorably discharged for conducting unauthorized experiments on supernatural subjects. Keep reading. The next page detailed Harrison's activities since his discharge. Private military contractor, suspected of running a supernatural mercenary organization, linked to at least 6 incidents of PAC territory seizures in the Pacific Northwest. He's done this before, I said, flipping through more documents. The Redwood PAC in Oregon, the Mountain View PAC in Washington. Both were dissolved within months of Harrison's people showing up. All smaller PACs with valuable territory, Damon confirmed. And all led by relatively young alphas without extensive council connections. The implications hit me like a sledgehammer. Someone's systematically eliminating independent PACs. That's what it looks like. The question is who's paying Harrison's bills. I turned to the final page and felt the bottom drop out of my world. It was a bank transfer record showing a payment of $2 million from an account registered to Ravencrest Holdings. Elena Ravencrest? I whispered. But she's the one who ordered us to work together. The same Elena Ravencrest who's been pushing for PAC consolidation for the past decade, Damon said grimly. Who's argued that smaller PACs are inefficient and vulnerable to outside threats. My hands were shaking as I closed the folder. She created the outside threats. It's the perfect strategy. Fund attacks on independent PACs, then swoop in as the concerned authority figure offering protection and stability. All you have to do is surrender your autonomy and accept absorption into a council-approved mega-PAC. I stood abruptly, pacing to the water's edge as the full scope of the betrayal sank in. Elena Ravencrest was one of the most respected wolves on the continent, a council member who'd held her position for over 60 years. The idea that she was systematically destroying PACs for political gain was almost incomprehensible. This changes everything, I said finally. Yes, it does. We can't trust the council. We can't trust anyone outside our immediate PACs. We can trust each other. The quiet certainty in his voice made me turn around. He was watching me with an intensity that made my pulse quicken, and I suddenly realized that last night had changed more than just our physical relationship. Can we? I asked softly. You tell me. He stood and walked toward me, stopping just close enough that I could feel his body heat. You've seen the evidence of what I gave up to protect you 10 years ago. You've fought beside me, seen how we moved together. What does your instinct tell you? I looked into his amber eyes and saw truth there, stark and uncompromising. More than that, I saw the boy I'd fallen for as a teenager, brave and protective and willing to sacrifice his own happiness for the people he cared about. My instincts tell me you're the only person I can trust completely, I admitted. Which is terrifying, because 6 months ago I would have cheerfully watched you get eaten by bears. He laughed, a warm sound that made something tight in my chest loosen. 6 months ago, the feeling was mutual. And now I'd fight an army of bears to keep you safe. The sincerity in his voice made my throat tight. Damon, I know this is complicated, he said, stepping closer until we were almost touching. I know we have a decade of history to work through and 2 PACs to consider, and a psychotic council member trying to destroy us. But I need you to know something. What? Last night wasn't just adrenaline or stress or temporary madness. His hand came up to cup my cheek, thumb tracing the line of my jaw. I've been wanting to kiss you again for 10 years. Since the day I walked away and convinced myself it was for the best. It was for the best, I whispered, even as I leaned into his touch. Your father would have destroyed my PAC. But he's dead now. Has been for 3 years. Damon's other hand found my waist, pulling me closer. The only thing standing between us now is our own fear. And 2 PACs who've been enemies for a decade. PACs that just worked together to fight off a common threat. PACs whose survival might depend on setting old grudges aside. He was right, and we both knew it. With Elena Ravencrest funding attacks against us, Silverwood and Blackthorn needed each other more than ever. But alliance was one thing. This, whatever was happening between us, was something else entirely. If we do this, I said quietly, there's no going back. Our packs will have to adapt, and not everyone's going to be happy about it. Are you happy about it? I considered the question seriously, weighing 10 years of careful independence against the way my wolf sang when he touched me. I'm terrified, I said finally.
But yes.
I think I am. His smile was brilliant and relieved and hungry all at once.
Good.
Because I'm about to kiss you again, and I want to make sure you're not going to knee me in the solar plexus. I make no promises about what I'll do after you kiss me, I said, rising on my toes to meet him halfway. This kiss was different from the desperate collision of the night before. Slower, deeper, full of promise and possibility. His hands tangled in my hair while mine fisted in his shirt, and when he nipped gently at my lower lip, I made a sound that was half growl, half purr. God, I've missed you, he murmured against my mouth. You don't have to miss me anymore, I whispered back. The look he gave me was so full of hope and hunger, and something that might have been love that it made my knees weak. But before either of us could say anything else, the sound of engines approaching made us spring apart. 3 black SUVs were winding their way down the quarry road, moving fast and purposefully. Even from a distance, I could see the council insignia on their doors. Elena, Damon breathed. She knows we're on to her. The vehicle skidded to a stop at the quarry's edge, disgorging a dozen armed figures in tactical gear. Elena Ravencrest stepped out of the lead SUV, her silver hair perfect and her expression coldly furious. Alphas Sterling and Blackthorn, she called out, her voice carrying easily across the water. How convenient to find you both in one place. Elena, I called back, fighting to keep my voice steady. What brings the council to neutral territory? Oh, I think you know. She gestured, and her people raised their weapons, not standard firearms, but some kind of high-tech guns that hummed with electrical energy. You've been asking uncomfortable questions and poking around in affairs that don't concern you. You mean we've been investigating the attacks you ordered? Damon said flatly. Elena's smile was all teeth. Prove it. I glanced at the folder still clutched in my hand, then at the armed figures surrounding us. Even if we could fight our way out, which was doubtful, we'd never make it to safety with the evidence intact. What do you want? I asked.
Simple.
Both your packs dissolve voluntarily and accept absorption into council-approved territories. Your pack members get to live, and you two get to disappear quietly. Everyone wins. And if we refuse? Then I'm afraid there will be a tragic accident. 2 young alphas, recklessly meeting in secret, killed by the very rogues they were supposed to be investigating. The council will be forced to step in and restore order to your leaderless packs. The casual way she discussed our murders made my skin crawl. You won't get away with this. Our packs will know what really happened. Will they? Your beta is already under surveillance, Alpha Sterling. As is yours, Alpha Blackthorn. One word from me, and they'll suffer the same tragic fate that's about to befall you. Rage boiled through me, hot and primal. This woman was threatening not just my life, but the lives of everyone I'd sworn to protect. My wolf snarled beneath my skin, demanding blood and retribution. But we were outnumbered and outgunned, trapped on the wrong side of a quarry with nowhere to run. Unless I caught Damon's eye and saw the same desperate calculation in his gaze. The quarry was 30 feet deep here, with crystal-clear water that would provide perfect cover. If we could make it to the bottom and swim to the far shore, we might have a chance. You have 30 seconds to decide, Elena announced. I need to discuss this with my co-alpha. I called back, then grabbed Damon's hand and whispered, Can you hold your breath for 3 minutes? If I have to.
Good.
When I say go, we jump. Swim deep and head for the far shore. Don't surface until you reach the rocks. He squeezed my hand in acknowledgement, then raised his voice. We need more time to consider. Time's up, Elena replied coldly. Fire. Go, I shouted. We dove off the log as energy blasts sizzled through the air where we'd been standing. The quarry water was shockingly cold, but I barely noticed as we kicked downward, using the natural rock formations to mask our movement. Above us, the surface erupted with more energy blasts as Elena's people tried to track our position. Damon swam beside me like some kind of mythical water creature, all fluid grace and controlled power. When my lungs began to burn, he caught my arm and pointed toward a submerged ledge where we could catch our breath without being seen from above. We surfaced carefully, keeping to the shadows of the overhanging rock. The sounds of shouting and searching drifted down from above, but I could tell Elena's people were having trouble pinpointing our location. "Now what?" Damon whispered. "Now we get out of here and warn our packs," I whispered back. "Elena's not going to give up just because we escaped. She'll escalate." "Agreed. But first." He pulled me closer in the dark water, his lips finding mine in a kiss that tasted like desperation and defiance. "I needed to do that in case we don't make it out of this." "We'll make it," I promised against his mouth. "We're stronger together than apart." "Yes," he agreed, his eyes burning with determination. "We are." The sound of boat engines starting up made us both freeze. Elena wasn't giving up. She was bringing the hunt to the water. "Time to go," I breathed. We slipped back beneath the surface and began the longest, most dangerous swim of our lives. Because now we weren't just fighting for our own survival, we were fighting for the future of our packs, our people, and whatever this thing between us might become. If we lived long enough to find out. Chapter 6. We made it to shore as the sun was setting, exhausted and half-drowned but alive. Elena's search boats had given up an hour earlier, probably convinced we'd drowned in the quarry's depths. The irony wasn't lost on me that the same place where we'd fallen in love as teenagers had just saved our lives as adults. "Your place or mine?" Damon asked as we crouched behind a cluster of boulders, watching the road for any sign of council vehicles. "Neither. Elena's people will be watching both packhouses." I pulled out my waterlogged phone, relieved to see it was still functional. "I know a place. Safe house my father built during the territorial wars. Only Marcus knows about it." 20 minutes later, we were holed up in a cabin so deep in the woods it didn't appear on any map. It was basic but functional, solar power, well water, and enough supplies to last a month. More importantly, it was warded against supernatural tracking, making it invisible to anyone who didn't already know its exact location. "Cozy," Damon observed, shaking water from his dark hair. "It serves its purpose." I was already pulling dry clothes from the storage cabinet, hyper-aware of how his wet shirt clung to the muscled lines of his chest. "We need to contact our packs. Elena will move fast now that she knows we're on to her." He nodded, accepting the dry clothes I tossed him with a grateful look. "Turn around. Unless you want to show." Heat flushed through me despite everything we'd just been through. "Not the time or place, Blackthorn." "Pity," he said, but there was humor in his voice. I turned my back and changed quickly, trying not to think about the fact that he was doing the same thing less than 10 feet away. The sound of rustling fabric and quiet breathing seemed magnified in the small space, and when he cleared his throat to indicate he was decent, I had to take a steadying breath before facing him. The dry clothes transformed him from drowned alpha to something that belonged in a wilderness adventure magazine. The thermal shirt hugged his broad shoulders, and the dark jeans emphasized his long legs in ways that made my mouth go dry. "Focus, Sterling. Lives are at stake." "Better?" he asked, noting my expression. "Different," I managed. "We should call our betas." I dialed Marcus first, putting the phone on speaker so Damon could hear. He answered on the first ring, his voice tight with worry. "Lyra, thank God. Elena Ravencrest came by an hour ago with some story about you and Blackthorn being killed by rogues. But when we asked to see the bodies, she got evasive." "Because there are no bodies," I said grimly. "Marcus, listen carefully. Elena is behind the rogue attacks. She's been systematically targeting independent packs for dissolution. We have evidence, but she tried to kill us to keep it quiet." The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, Marcus said, "Are you absolutely certain about this?" "Certain enough to risk my life on it." "How long ago did she leave?" 40 minutes, maybe less. She had a dozen vehicles with her, all loaded with tactical personnel. She's making her move, Damon said quietly. Kane needs to know. I nodded and dialed Kane's number, my heart hammering as it rang once, twice, 3 times before going to voicemail. Try again, Damon ordered, real fear creeping into his voice. This time, Kane answered on the first ring, but his voice was strained. Alpha, where the hell are you? The council's here with some bullshit story about you being dead, and they've got us surrounded. How many? Damon demanded. 30, maybe more. Armed to the teeth and demanding we stand down for processing. Processing, I repeated with a chill. That was council euphemism for forced dissolution. Listen to me carefully, Damon said. Elena Ravencrest is not here under legitimate council authority. She's conducting an illegal operation to seize our territories. Do not, under any circumstances, allow her people into the pack house. Copy that. But boss, they've got us outnumbered and outgunned. We can hold them off for a while, but not forever. I looked at Damon, seeing my own desperation mirrored in his eyes. Our packs were under siege, and we were trapped in the middle of nowhere with no way to help them. How long can you hold out? I asked. Few hours, maybe. They haven't started shooting yet, but I can tell they're getting impatient. Hold them off as long as you can, Damon ordered. We're coming. Boss, if Elena's really behind this, then coming back is suicide. You need to stay hidden and…
No.
Damon's voice carried absolute alpha authority. A leader doesn't abandon his people. We'll find a way. He ended the call and immediately dialed Marcus back. How are things at Silverwood?
Tense.
Elena's people haven't surrounded us yet, but they're definitely in the area. I've got everyone on high alert and ready to barricade if necessary. Good man. Whatever happens, don't let them in. We'll be in touch. I ended the call and sank into one of the cabin's wooden chairs, the weight of responsibility crushing down on me. We can't take on 30 armed operatives with just the 2 of us. No, Damon agreed, settling into the chair across from me. But we don't have to. I looked up at him. What do you mean? Think about it. Elena's operation only works if it stays secret. She can't risk exposure to the larger supernatural community, which means she has to move fast and keep this contained. But what if it wasn't contained anymore? Understanding began to dawn. You want to go public. Not just public. I want to call in every favor, contact every ally, and make enough noise that the entire council has to take notice. Elena can't operate in the shadows if we drag her into the light. It was a risky strategy. Going over Elena's head to appeal directly to the council could backfire spectacularly if we were wrong about her unauthorized activities. But it was also our only real option. Who do we call first? Damon pulled out a waterproof phone case and extracted his device. Alexander Nightshade. He's got no love for Elena, and his pack has enough political weight to get the council's attention. While he made the call, I started mentally cataloging our other potential allies. The problem was that most alphas would be reluctant to get involved in what could be perceived as a territorial dispute between 2 traditionally hostile packs. Alexander, Damon said when the call connected. I need a favor. A big one. I could hear the deep voice on the other end, but not the words. Damon's expression grew grimmer as he listened. Yes, I'm sure. No, this isn't pack politics as usual. I understand the risks, but Elena Ravencrest is conducting an illegal operation to dissolve independent packs. The conversation went on for 10 minutes, with Damon patiently explaining the situation and providing what evidence he could over the phone. Finally, he handed the phone to me. Alexander Nightshade, he said. He wants to hear it from you too. I took the phone, trying to project confidence I didn't entirely feel. Alpha Nightshade. Alpha Sterling. His voice was cultured, with just a hint of an accent I couldn't place. Damon's told me a rather extraordinary story. I'm inclined to believe him, given his reputation for honesty, but I need to hear your perspective. For the next 15 minutes, I laid out everything we knew about Elena's operation, the timing of the attacks, Harrison's background, the bank records connecting Ravencrest holdings to the mercenary operation. Alexander asked pointed questions, clearly testing the consistency of our story. This is deeply troubling, he said finally. If what you're telling me is true, Elena has committed crimes that warrant immediate removal from the council. Will you help us? I asked. I'll do more than that. I'll call an emergency council session for tomorrow morning. Every surviving council member will be there, along with representatives from every major pack in North America. Elena won't be able to suppress this, no matter how many tactical teams she has. Relief flooded through me. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You'll need to present your evidence in person, which means getting to the council chambers alive. That won't be easy if Elena has people hunting you. We'll manage, Damon said, taking the phone back. See that you do. The session is at dawn. Don't be late. The call ended, leaving us alone in the cabin's growing darkness. I could feel exhaustion creeping up on me. It had been less than 24 hours since the attack at the quarry, but it felt like a lifetime. We should try to get some sleep, Damon said quietly. Tomorrow's going to be brutal. He was right, but the cabin only had one bed. The thought of sharing sleeping space with him sent electricity shooting through my tired body. I'll take the couch, I said quickly. Lyra. His voice was gentle but firm. We're both adults and we're both exhausted. The bed is big enough for two people who can control themselves for one night. He was right, of course. But the problem wasn't controlling myself. It was the way my wolf hummed with contentment whenever he was near, the way my body seemed to fit perfectly against his, the growing certainty that whatever was happening between us was far more serious than simple attraction. Fine, I said. But keep your hands to yourself. His answering smile was wicked. I'll try my best. An hour later, I was lying rigidly on my side of the bed, hyper-aware of every breath Damon took beside me. He'd been true to his word about keeping his hands to himself, but that didn't stop me from feeling the heat radiating off his body or catching his scent every time he shifted in his sleep. Lyra? His voice was soft in the darkness. Yeah. Thank you. For trusting me today. For fighting beside me. For... He paused, searching for words. For giving us another chance. I turned to face him, able to see the gleam of his eyes in the moonlight filtering through the cabin's single window. We still have a lot to work through. I know. But we're alive to work through it, which is more than we had this morning.
He was right about that.
24 hours ago, we'd been reluctant allies forced together by council mandate. Now we were something else entirely, partners in the truest sense, bound by shared danger and a connection that had survived 10 years of forced separation. Damon. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that I don't regret this. Any of it. He was quiet for so long I thought he'd fallen asleep. Then his hand found mine across the space between us, fingers intertwining with a gentle pressure that made my chest tight. Neither do I, he whispered. I fell asleep holding his hand, my wolf finally quiet and content for the first time in a decade. And if I dreamed of amber eyes and promises whispered in the darkness, well, that was nobody's business but mine. Tomorrow would bring new dangers and impossible choices. But tonight, for the first time in 10 years, I wasn't facing them alone. Chapter 7. Dawn came too early, bringing with it the weight of everything we had to accomplish in the next few hours. The council chambers were a 4-hour drive from our hidden cabin, assuming we could make it there without being intercepted by Elena's people. Ready for this? Damon asked as we prepared to leave the relative safety of the woods. I checked my phone one more time. Messages from both Marcus and King confirming that their respective standoffs were still holding, but barely. Elena's people were getting more aggressive, and both our packs were running low on supplies and patience. As ready as I'll ever be, I said, tucking the folder of evidence inside my jacket. You sure Alexander can be trusted? As sure as I can be about anyone. Damon's expression was grim as he scanned the tree line for any sign of surveillance. He's got no reason to love Elena and enough political clout to make the other council members listen. The drive to the council chambers felt like the longest 4 hours of my life. We took back roads and circuitous routes, stopping frequently to check for pursuit. Twice, we had to detour around roadblocks that might or might not have been related to Lena's operation, but neither of us was willing to take chances. Tell me about the other council members, I said as we finally approached the outskirts of the city where the chambers were located. Who are we likely to face? Besides Elena? There's Dmitry Volkov, old-school Russian, traditionalist but generally fair. Maria Santos from the South American Confederation, sharp as a blade and twice as dangerous. And Thomas Gray, Elena's primary rival for council leadership. Which ones might side with us? Thomas, definitely, if only to score points against Elena. Dimitri's hard to read, but he respects strength and directness. Maria? Damon shrugged. Could go either way. She's practical above all else. The council chambers occupied an entire city block in the heart of downtown, a gleaming glass and steel monument to supernatural political power. I'd never been inside, but every alpha on the continent knew its reputation. This was where pack fates were decided, where territorial disputes were settled, and where careers were made or destroyed with a single vote. Security will be tight, Damon warned as we approached the main entrance. Elena's people might try to intercept us before we reach the chamber. But the lobby was surprisingly calm, staffed by the usual mix of supernatural security personnel and human administrative workers who had no idea what they were really protecting. Alexander Nightshade was waiting for us near the elevator banks, his silver hair and expensive suit making him look more like a corporate executive than one of the most powerful alphas in North America. Cutting it close, he observed as we approached. The session starts in 20 minutes. We had to make sure we weren't followed, I explained. Alexander's pale blue eyes assessed us both, with uncomfortable intensity. You look like hell. When was the last time either of you slept? What sleep? Damon asked wryly. We've been a little busy trying not to get murdered. Fair point. Come on, I'll brief you on the way up. The elevator ride to the 37th floor felt both endless and far too short. Alexander explained that he'd managed to gather 4 of the 7 council members on short notice, enough to call an official session, but not enough to guarantee any particular outcome. Elena's here, of course, he said as the elevator climbed. She's been spinning this as a rogue territorial dispute that got out of hand. Claims you 2 were killed trying to negotiate with the very mercenaries she hired to hunt you. And the others believe her? I asked. Thomas Gray is skeptical, which is promising. Dmitry and Maria are withholding judgment until they hear all the evidence. The problem is that Elena's had hours to prepare her story, while you 2 look like you've been sleeping in the woods. We have been sleeping in the woods, Damon pointed out. Yes, well, try to project confidence anyway. The council responds to strength and certainty, not desperation. The elevator doors opened onto a marble-floored hallway lined with portraits of past council members. Each face looked stern and implacable, as if they were judging everyone who passed beneath their painted gazes. My wolf stirred nervously, recognizing the weight of supernatural authority that permeated this place. One more thing, Alexander said as we approached the massive wooden doors that led to the main chamber. Elena's already accused you of collaborating to stage a coup against legitimate council authority. She's claiming this whole thing is an elaborate conspiracy to seize power. My stomach dropped. Can she make that stick? Not if your evidence is as solid as you claim. But be prepared for her to attack your credibility, your motives, and your relationship. Damon's hand found mine briefly, a gesture of support that sent warmth shooting up my arm. Let her try. The truth is on our side. The council chamber was a circular room with a domed ceiling that rose 30 feet overhead. 5 massive chairs arranged in a semicircle dominated the space, with each seat elevated to give its occupant a commanding view of the proceedings. 4 of the 5 chairs were occupied, and I recognized Elena Ravencrest immediately. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, and she wore a navy blue suit that projected authority and competence. Alphas Sterling and Blackthorn. Thomas Gray spoke from the center chair, his voice carrying easily through the acoustic perfection of the chamber. We were told you were dead. Reports of our demise were greatly exaggerated, Damon replied smoothly. As was the suggestion that we died in service to pack unity rather than fleeing from council-authorized assassination. Elena's expression didn't change, but I saw her hands tighten on her chair's armrests. That's a serious accusation, Alpha Blackthorn. I hope you have evidence to support such inflammatory rhetoric. We do. I stepped forward, pulling the folder from my jacket with hands that were steadier than I'd expected. Evidence that you've been funding rogue attacks against independent packs, using a private military contractor named James Harrison to systematically eliminate any alpha who refuses council consolidation. Preposterous, Elena said calmly. These two have clearly concocted some elaborate fantasy to excuse their own territorial aggression. Then you won't mind if we present our evidence, Damon said, his voice carrying just enough challenge to make Elena's eyes flash. Thomas Gray leaned forward with obvious interest. Please proceed, Alpha Sterling. For the next 30 minutes, I laid out everything we'd discovered about Elena's operation. The bank records linking Ravencrest Holdings to Harrison's organization. The pattern of attacks that coincidentally preceded territorial seizures. The specialized equipment and military-grade coordination that spoke of serious funding and planning. Elena countered each piece of evidence with smooth explanations and alternative theories. The bank transfers were legitimate payments for consulting services on PAC security. The attack patterns were coincidental. The equipment had been stolen from legitimate sources. But I could see doubt creeping into the other council members' expressions, especially when I described our narrow escape from the quarry. You claim Elena Ravencrest personally ordered your execution. Dmitry Volkov spoke for the first time, his Russian accent thick with skepticism. This is extraordinary claim requiring extraordinary proof. I have that proof, I said, pulling out my phone. Audio recording of the entire encounter. Elena's composure finally cracked, just for an instant, but long enough for everyone in the room to notice. Recordings can be fabricated. Can they? Maria Santos spoke with quiet intensity. Thomas, I think we need to hear this evidence. The next few minutes were excruciating as my phone's speaker filled the chamber with Elena's voice coldly discussing our planned murders and the threats against our packs. When the recording ended, the silence was deafening. Well, Thomas Gray said finally. This is illuminating. Elena's recovery was swift and impressive. Obviously fabricated. These two have had ample time to create false evidence to support their coup attempt. Coup attempt. Damon's voice was dangerously quiet. We didn't ask for this fight, Elena. You brought it to us when you decided our packs were inconvenient obstacles to your consolidation plans. Your packs are weak and vulnerable. Elena shot back, her mask of composure finally slipping. Small, isolated, led by alphas too proud and too stupid to accept the protection of proper council oversight. I was trying to save you from your own incompetence. The admission hung in the air like a confession. Even Elena seemed to realize she'd revealed too much, because she fell silent with a look of fury that made my skin crawl. Fascinating perspective, Maria Santos observed dryly. Tell me, Elena, how long have you been making unilateral decisions about which packs deserve to exist? I've been protecting supernatural interests for 60 years, Elena replied, rallying. Sometimes that requires difficult decisions. Decisions like hiring mercenaries to murder pack leaders? Thomas Gray's voice was arctic. Decisions like conducting illegal military operations on sovereign territory? Everything I've done has been for the greater good of our people. No, Damon said, stepping forward with deadly calm. Everything you've done has been for your own power. You've perverted the council's purpose, betrayed your oath of protection, and committed crimes that would make human war criminals proud. Elena's eyes blazed with hatred. You arrogant child. You have no idea what leadership really costs, what sacrifices are necessary to maintain order. Your precious independence is a luxury we can't afford in the modern world. Independence is never a luxury, I said quietly. It's a right. One you've been systematically destroying because it threatens your control. Enough. Thomas Gray's voice cut through the rising tension with absolute authority. Elena Ravencrest, you are hereby suspended from council duties pending a full investigation into these allegations. Security will escort you from the building. You can't do this, Elena snarled, rising from her chair. I have served this council faithfully for. You have betrayed everything this council stands for. Dmitry Volkov interrupted, his voice heavy with disgust. Security. 2 large men in dark suits appeared as if from nowhere, flanking Elena's chair. For a moment, I thought she might resist, might call on whatever resources she still had available. Instead, she straightened her jacket and fixed Damon and me with a look of pure malevolence. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "You may have won this battle, but you've made an enemy who will outlive you both." "We'll take our chances," I replied evenly. As Elena was escorted from the chamber, I felt some of the crushing weight of the past few days finally lifting from my shoulders. We'd done it, exposed her operation, saved our packs, and somehow survived to tell about it. Well, Thomas Gray said once the doors had closed behind Elena and her escort. That was refreshing. It's been years since we've had such clear-cut evidence of council corruption. "What happens now?" Damon asked. "Now, we clean up the mess Elena left behind. Her mercenary operation will be dismantled, Harrison will be captured and prosecuted, and your packs will receive formal council protection during the transition period. And our territories?" I couldn't help asking. Maria Santos smiled for the first time since we'd entered the chamber. "Your territories remain yours, Alpha Sterling, as does your independence, though I suspect you'll find the council more receptive to cooperation requests in the future." "Cooperation, not absorption?" Damon clarified. "Cooperation," Thomas Gray confirmed. "Elena's consolidation agenda dies with her career. The council serves the packs, not the other way around." Relief flooded through me so completely that I had to lock my knees to keep from swaying. We'd actually done it, saved our packs, preserved our independence, and somehow managed not to get killed in the process. "There is one more matter," Dmitry Volkov said, his pale eyes moving between Damon and me with uncomfortable intensity. "This alliance between Silverwood and Blackthorn. It performed admirably under pressure, but alliances between traditionally hostile packs can be unstable." I felt heat flush through my cheeks as I realized what he was implying. The way Damon and I had worked together, supported each other, and quite obviously developed feelings that went far beyond political necessity hadn't gone unnoticed. "The alliance is solid," Damon said firmly. "Silverwood and Blackthorn have found common ground." "Have they?" Thomas Gray's expression was amused. "And what form might this common ground take?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. I could feel all eyes on me, waiting for my response, and suddenly I realized this was the moment that would define not just my relationship with Damon, but the future of both our packs. "The form it takes is our business," I said finally. "But yes, the alliance is permanent. Silverwood and Blackthorn stand together." "Together," Damon agreed, and the way he said it made my heart skip. Thomas Gray smiled. "Excellent. In that case, I believe we can adjourn this session. You two have packs to return to and a rather significant mess to clean up." As we filed out of the chamber, Alexander Nightshade fell into step beside us. "Well done, both of you. Elena won't be a threat anymore, and you've managed to forge something positive out of a potentially catastrophic situation. We couldn't have done it without your help," I said gratefully. "Don't mention it. Though I do have one piece of advice." He paused at the elevator, his expression turning serious. "What you two have accomplished, the trust, the partnership, the way you move together, it's rare. Don't let politics or old grudges or pack traditionalists convince you to waste it." The elevator doors opened, and he stepped inside with a knowing smile. "Good luck with everything that comes next." As the doors closed behind him, I found myself alone with Damon in the marble hallway, the weight of everything that had happened finally settling over us both. "So," he said quietly, "we're allied permanently?" "Apparently so." I met his gaze, seeing hope and uncertainty and something that might have been love burning in those amber depths. "Any regrets?" "Only that it took a homicidal council member to get us here," he replied. "What about you?" I considered the question seriously. 48 hours ago, I'd been a single alpha leading an independent pack, answerable to no one and trusting even fewer people. Now I was part of something larger, an alliance that was both political and personal, built on shared danger and mutual respect, and a growing certainty that some connections were worth any risk. "No regrets," I said finally. But we should probably head home before our people start a war without us. His laugh was warm and genuine. Good point. Ready to face whatever comes next, partner. With you. I stepped closer, close enough to see the golden flecks in his eyes and feel the heat radiating off his skin. I'm ready for anything. The kiss he gave me was soft and sure and full of promise, a seal on everything we'd just committed to, both publicly and privately. And when we finally broke apart, I could see our future stretching ahead like an open road, full of possibilities I was finally brave enough to explore. Together. Chapter 8. The drive back to Pack territory felt different than our desperate flight 2 days earlier. We were returning as victors, with Elena's threat eliminated and our alliance officially recognized by the Council. But more than that, we were returning as partners in every sense of the word, and that changed everything. Nervous? Damon asked as we approached the road that would split toward our respective pack houses. Terrified, I admitted. Our people have been enemies for 10 years. Explaining that we're suddenly allies and... I gestured between us. Whatever this is, isn't going to be easy. We'll figure it out. His hand found mine across the center console, fingers intertwining with easy familiarity. We've survived everything else. That's what worries me. Elena was trying to kill us, which made choosing sides simple. Now we have to navigate pack politics, territorial integration, and the fact that half our people probably still want to throttle each other. Damon's thumb traced over my knuckles, sending warmth shooting up my arm. What are you most worried about? The question made me examine my fears more closely. Marcus, I said finally. He's been my beta for 5 years, my friend for 20. He's also suspicious, protective, and not exactly known for his diplomatic skills. When he finds out we're... I trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence. Mated. Damon suggested quietly. The word hit me like a physical blow. Are we? Mated, I mean? I don't know. His voice was honest, vulnerable in a way that made my chest tight. What I feel for you is deeper than alliance, stronger than attraction. When that rogue came at you 2 nights ago, my wolf nearly went feral at the thought of losing you. But mating is permanent, life-altering. I won't pressure you into something you're not ready for. I stared out at the familiar forest rushing past, my mind spinning with possibilities and complications. Mating bonds among wolves were sacred, unbreakable connections that transcended simple marriage. They were also rare. Most alphas chose political partnerships rather than risking the complete vulnerability that came with a true mate bond. I'm scared, I admitted quietly. Of me.
Of this.
Of how much I want it. I turned to meet his gaze, seeing my own uncertainty reflected in his amber eyes. 10 years ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. Now I'm older, supposedly wiser, and absolutely terrified of making the wrong choice. What would make it the wrong choice? The question forced me to examine my deepest fears. If you changed your mind, if the politics became too complicated, if our packs couldn't adapt and we ended up destroying everything we've built trying to make this work. Damon was quiet for several miles, his thumb still tracing gentle patterns over my knuckles. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. I can't promise you that the politics won't be complicated or that integrating our packs will be easy. But I can promise you that I won't change my mind. What I feel for you isn't based on convenience or alliance or any other rational consideration. It's elemental, Lyra. You're part of me in ways I don't fully understand. That's what scares me, I whispered, because I feel the same way. We reached the split in the road too soon, and Damon pulled over at the small rest area that marked the boundary between our territories. For a moment, we just sat there in the growing dusk, both reluctant to face whatever came next. We should probably talk to our packs separately first, I said finally. Let them process the alliance before we spring the personal relationship on them. Agreed. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. Meet at the quarry. He smiled, and it was full of warmth and promise, and something that looked suspiciously like forever. It's a date. The kiss he gave me was sweet and lingering, a promise that whatever challenges we faced, we'd face them together. When I finally pulled back, my heart was hammering and my wolf was purring with contentment. Go, I said softly. Before I do something reckless like follow you home. Would that be so terrible? Ask me tomorrow. 20 minutes later, I was pulling into the Silverwood Packhouse driveway, my stomach knotted with anticipation and dread. The main building was blazing with lights, and I could see pack members moving around inside with the restless energy of people who'd been on high alert for too long. Marcus met me at the front door, his expression cycling through relief, anger, and exasperation in rapid succession. "You're alive," he said flatly. "I'm alive."
Good.
"Now I can kill you myself." He pulled me into a fierce hug that lifted me off my feet. "Do you have any idea what the past 2 days have been like? Elena's people had us surrounded. The council was giving conflicting orders, and you disappeared without a trace." "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. "We had to stay hidden until we could expose Elena's operation."
We.
His eyes sharpened with suspicion. "You and Blackthorn?" "Yes, me and Blackthorn. Who, by the way, probably saved my life at least 3 times in the past 48 hours. Marcus studied my face with uncomfortable intensity. "There's something different about you. A lot has happened, I'll bet. Come on. Everyone's in the main hall. They need to see that you're safe, and you need to explain what the hell is going on." The Silverwood pack had gathered in the main hall, their faces showing a mix of relief, curiosity, and lingering tension. These were my people, wolves I'd grown up with, trained with, led for the past 6 years. They deserved the truth, even if that truth was going to complicate all of our lives. "First, let me say that the immediate threat is over," I began, standing at the front of the room where my father had once addressed pack meetings. "Elena Ravencrest has been removed from the council and will face prosecution for her crimes against our pack and others." Relief rippled through the assembled wolves, followed quickly by questions called out from the crowd. "What crimes? Where have you been? What about Blackthorn pack?" I held up a hand for silence. Elena was funding the rogue attacks against us, using them as a pretext to dissolve our pack and seize our territory. Blackthorn pack was targeted the same way. Their alpha and I worked together to expose her operation to the council. Worked together how? The question came from Sarah, and her tone suggested she already suspected the answer. "Closely," I said carefully. "Close enough to realize that 10 years of hostility between our packs was based on misunderstandings and manipulation by Elena and others who wanted to keep us divided. And now," Marcus's voice was deceptively calm, "now Silverwood and Blackthorn are formal allies. We'll coordinate patrols, share intelligence, and support each other against external threats." The murmur that went through the crowd was part surprise, part skepticism, and part something that might have been approval. These wolves had been living under siege for months. The idea of having strong allies probably appealed to their survival instincts. "What does that mean for day-to-day operations?" asked Tom, my head enforcer. "Minimal changes initially. We'll still maintain our own territory and leadership structure, but we'll have backup when we need it and access to resources we couldn't afford on our own." "And personally?" Sarah's question was quiet but carried clearly through the hall. "What does this alliance mean for you, Lyra?" The moment of truth. I could deflect, give them the political answer, maintain the careful separation between my public role and private feelings. Or I could trust these people who'd followed me through fire and uncertainty, who deserved to know where their alpha's heart truly lay. "Personally," I said, meeting Sarah's gaze directly, "it means I'm exploring a relationship with Alpha Blackthorn. A serious relationship, with all the complications and possibilities that entails." The silence that followed was deafening. I could see shock, confusion, and in some cases outright disbelief on the faces staring back at me. Marcus looked like he'd been hit by a truck. "You're dating him?" someone called from the back. "It's more complicated than dating." "Huh, much more complicated?" Marcus asked, though his expression suggested he already knew. "Potentially mated bond complicated." This time the silence stretched so long I began to wonder if I'd broken something fundamental in my pack's social structure. Then Marcus stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Are you happy?" he asked quietly. The question caught me off guard. Of all the responses I'd expected, anger, disbelief, political objections, happiness hadn't been at the top of the list. Yes, I said, realizing it was true. For the first time in 10 years, I'm actually happy. Marcus nodded slowly, then turned to address the room. You've all known Lyra since she was a pup. You've seen her sacrifice everything for this pack, put our needs above her own desires every single day for 6 years. If Alpha Blackthorn makes her happy, and if this alliance keeps us safe, then I support both decisions. The room erupted in discussion as pack members debated the implications among themselves. I caught fragments of conversation, concerns about territorial boundaries, questions about whether Blackthorn wolves could be trusted, speculation about what a mated alpha might mean for pack hierarchy. It won't be easy, Sarah said, appearing at my elbow. Some of the older members still remember the territory disputes. And there are going to be practical questions about how this all works. I know, but we'll figure it out. You really love him, don't you? The question was soft, meant for my ears alone. I looked at my friend, my tracker, my confidant, one of the few people who'd seen me at my most vulnerable, and nodded. I really do. Sarah smiled, and it was full of genuine warmth. Then we'll make it work. That's what pack family does. The discussion continued for another hour as we worked through the practical implications of our new alliance. There were legitimate concerns about territorial boundaries, patrol schedules, and resource sharing that would need to be addressed. But the overall response was more positive than I'd dare hope. As the meeting began to wind down, Marcus approached me with expression I couldn't read. "Walk with me," he said. We stepped onto the front porch, where the night air was cool and filled with familiar forest scents. For several minutes, we stood in comfortable silence, both processing everything that had changed in such a short time. "You're scared," he observed finally. "Terrified," I admitted. This could go wrong in so many ways. It could, but it could also go very, very right. Marcus leaned against the porch railing, studying my face in the moonlight. "I've never seen you look at anyone the way you looked when you mentioned Blackthorn tonight." How did I look? Like you'd found something you didn't even know you'd lost. The observation hit closer to home than I was comfortable with. Is that bad? Are you kidding? Lyra, you've been carrying the weight of leadership alone for 6 years. You've never let anyone close enough to share that burden, never trusted anyone enough to show weakness. If Blackthorn can be that person for you, if he can be your partner in every sense, then this pack will be stronger for it. And if he can't? Marcus's smile was fierce and protective. Then we'll remind him why it's a bad idea to break our alpha's heart. I laughed despite my nervousness, grateful beyond words for this man who'd stood by my side through everything. Thank you for supporting this, for trusting my judgment even when it seems completely insane. Your judgment has kept us alive and thriving for 6 years. I'm not going to start doubting it now. As I headed inside to face the dozens of smaller conversations and questions that would follow tonight's announcement, I felt some of the crushing weight of uncertainty finally lifting. My pack would support this alliance, even if they didn't fully understand it yet. Now I just had to hope that Damon was having similar success with his people. Because tomorrow, we'd start building something entirely new, a partnership that was both political and personal, an alliance that could reshape the supernatural landscape of our region. It was ambitious, complicated, and quite possibly the best decision I'd ever made. I couldn't wait to find out. Chapter 9. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, with a kind of golden light that made everything seem possible. I arrived at the quarry early, nervous energy making it impossible to sit still. The events of the past few days felt surreal in the morning light. Had we really exposed a council conspiracy, survived assassination attempts, and committed to a future that would change both our packs forever? The sound of footsteps on the rocky shore answered that question. Damon emerged from the tree line looking tired but satisfied, and the smile he gave me made my heart skip. "How did it go?" I asked as he settled beside me on our familiar log. "Better than expected, actually." Kane was suspicious about the timing and convinced I was suffering from some kind of Stockholm syndrome, but the younger pack members were intrigued by the alliance possibilities. And the personal stuff? Damon's expression grew more complex. Mixed reactions. Some were concerned about pack dynamics, Others were just surprised I was capable of any emotion beyond territorial aggression. But Nora pointed out that I've been miserable for 10 years, and if you make me less of a brooding nightmare to live with, then everyone wins. I laughed, surprised by how much that touched me. Nora sounds wise.
She is.
She also asked if you were planning to take the Blackthorn name, or if I'd be joining Silverwood. The question made my breath catch. What did you tell her? That we hadn't discussed it yet. His amber eyes searched my face with careful intensity. But now that she's brought it up, what do you want, Lyra? If we do this, if we make it official, how do we handle the practical aspects? It was a fair question, and one I'd been avoiding thinking about too deeply. Traditional mating bonds usually involved one partner joining the other's pack, but we were both alphas with territories and people depending on us. I don't know, I admitted. I can't abandon Silverwood, and you can't abandon Blackthorn. Maybe we find a middle ground, maintain separate territories but coordinate everything? Or eventually merge into something entirely new. A metapack. Damon considered the idea. It's not unprecedented. The Northern Territories have several successful multi-clan alliances. It would be complicated. Everything worthwhile is complicated. He shifted closer, his shoulder brushing against mine. The question is whether you think it's worth the complication. I looked out over the quarry water, remembering all the afternoons we'd spent here as teenagers, dreaming about futures we thought were impossible. Now those futures were within reach, if we were brave enough to take them. Yes, I said quietly. I think it's worth it. Damon's hand found mine, fingers intertwining with the easy familiarity that still amazed me.
Good.
Because I brought something. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box that made my heart stop. Damon. It's not what you think, he said quickly, though his nervous energy suggested otherwise. I mean, it is what you think, but not, just let me explain. He opened the box to reveal 2 rings, not traditional wedding bands, but something uniquely supernatural. Each ring was carved from dark wood and inlaid with silver in patterns that seemed to shift and flow in the morning light. They're made from heartwood of the sentinel oak, he explained. The tree that marks the original boundary between our territories. Kane's grandmother was a master craftsman. She made these 50 years ago when she thought our packs might unite through political alliance. I stared at the rings, seeing the careful artistry and the symbolic weight they carried. They're beautiful. They're also functional. The silver is enchanted. When worn by bonded mates, the rings allow emotional and physical awareness across distance. Not mind reading, he clarified quickly, but general sense of well-being, location, emotional state. Mated bond enhancement, I said, understanding flooding through me.
Yes.
But they only work if the bond is genuine, freely chosen by both parties. Damon's voice was carefully neutral, but I could see the hope and fear warring in his expression. I'm not asking you to decide right now. I just wanted you to know that if, and when you're ready, these exist. I reached for the smaller ring, marveling at how it seemed to warm under my touch. The silver inlay caught the light like captured moonbeams, and I could feel a faint humming energy that seemed to resonate with something deep in my chest. What happens if we do this? I asked. If we make it official? Legally, we'd be recognized as co-leaders of an allied territory. Politically, we'd have more influence with the council and stronger protection against future threats like Elena. Personally, he paused, searching for words. Personally, we'd be committed to each other and to building something new together. And if it doesn't work, if we can't balance pack responsibilities with a personal relationship, then we'll have tried. But Lyra, what we have, this connection, this partnership, it's already working. We've proven we can fight together, trust each other, lead together when necessary. The rings would just make it official. I turned the ring over in my palm, feeling the weight of possibility it represented. Everything logical told me this was too fast, too risky, too complicated to possibly succeed. But everything in my heart said this was exactly what I'd been missing, what I'd been waiting for without even knowing it. Ask me properly, I said quietly. Damon went very still beside me. What? You're giving me very practical reasons for a very emotional decision. If you want me to wear your ring, if you want to bind our lives together permanently, then ask me properly. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by something that looked like wonder. He slid off the log to kneel in front of me, taking my hands in both of his. Lyra Sterling, he said, his voice rough with emotion, you're the strongest, most courageous, most infuriatingly stubborn woman I've ever met. You've been my rival, my enemy, my reluctant partner, and now you're the person I can't imagine living without. Will you be my mate, my co-leader, my partner in everything? Will you help me build something new and better than either of us could create alone? The words hung between us like a bridge across 10 years of separation and hurt. I could see our entire future stretching ahead, the challenges, the complications, the political negotiations, and territorial adjustments and pack integration issues that would make the next few years interesting, to say the least. But I could also see something else. Lazy Sunday mornings in shared territory, strategic meetings that turned into stolen kisses, the absolute certainty of having someone who understood both the weight of leadership and the person I was beneath it. Yes, I said, the word barely above a whisper. Yes to all of it. The smile that spread across Damon's face was incandescent. He slipped the ring onto my finger with shaking hands, and I marveled at how perfectly it fit, how right it felt to finally wear something that marked me as chosen and cherished. Your turn, I said, taking the larger ring from the box. Damon Blackthorn, I began, trying to match his formal tone. You're arrogant, protective, surprisingly good at tactical planning, and the only person who's ever made me want to risk everything for a chance at forever. Will you be my mate, my partner, my co-conspirator in reshaping the supernatural political landscape of this region? God, yes, he breathed, and his hands were definitely shaking as I slipped the ring onto his finger. The moment the silver touched his skin, I felt it, a warm, golden connection that hummed along my nerves and settled deep in my chest. It wasn't overwhelming, just a quiet awareness of his presence and emotional state that felt like coming home. Wow, I breathed.
Yeah.
His eyes were wide with wonder. I can feel you're nervous but happy, and a little overwhelmed. You're excited and relieved and completely head over heels, I said, marveling at the emotional feedback flowing between us. This is incredible. This is just the beginning. He pulled me down from the log and into his arms, kissing me with a passion and tenderness that made my knees weak. I could feel his emotions through the bond, love and joy and a fierce protectiveness that matched my own feelings perfectly. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard and grinning like idiots. So, I said, trying to regain some composure. What happens now? Do we call our packs? Make an announcement? Start planning territorial integration. Now, Damon said, his thumb tracing over the ring on my finger, we go home and tell our people that their alphas have officially lost their minds. That's one way to put it. I leaned into his warmth, marveling at how natural it felt to be in his arms. Though I prefer to think of it as finally coming to our senses. Much better phrasing. You should handle all our public relations. The casual way he said, made my chest tight with happiness. Our packs, our territory, our future. After 10 years of careful independence, the idea of sharing everything with someone felt both terrifying and wonderful. We should probably head back, I said reluctantly. Our people are going to want details about the alliance, and we need to start working out the practical aspects. Practical aspects, Damon repeated with a grin. Like where we're going to live. Which pack house gets to be headquarters. How we're going to explain to two groups of former enemies that they need to learn to work together. All of the above, plus patrol schedules, territorial boundaries, resource allocation, and approximately 1,000 other details that are going to give us both headaches. Worth it, he said firmly, pulling me closer. Ask me again in 6 months, when we're mediating our 15th dispute about hunting rights. I'll ask you in 50 years when we're still figuring out new ways to make this work. The certainty in his voice made my heart flutter. 50 years. A lifetime of shared challenges and stolen moments, and the quiet comfort of having someone who understood the weight of leadership because he carried it too. I love you, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Damon went very still, his amber eyes searching my face with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. Say that again. I love you, I repeated, stronger this time. I've probably loved you since we were teenagers, and I definitely love you now, and I'm going to keep loving you even when you're being impossible about pack politics. His kiss was gentle and reverent, full of wonder and promise. When he pulled back, his voice was rough with emotion. I love you too, Lyra Sterling. More than I thought possible, more than I probably deserve. You're everything I never knew I needed, and everything I was afraid to want. We stood there in the morning light, holding each other beside the water that had witnessed our first tentative friendship, our painful separation, and now our beginning again. The rings on our fingers caught the sunlight, sending small rainbows dancing across the quarry surface. Ready to face the chaos? I asked eventually. With you? I'm ready for anything. Chapter 10. The next 3 weeks tested that confidence in ways I hadn't anticipated. Absolutely not, declared Harold Winters, Silverwood's eldest pack member and unofficial keeper of grudges. I won't share patrol routes with Blackthorn wolves. They'll use the intelligence to plan raids. They're our allies now, I said for the dozenth time, trying to keep my patience intact. They're not planning raids, they're helping us defend against actual threats. Says who? You. Harold's sneer was decades in the making. You're so besotted with their alpha you can't see straight. The meeting hall fell silent, tension crackling through the air like electricity before a storm. Harold had just crossed a line that no pack member should cross with their alpha, and everyone knew it. I felt Damon's presence through our bond. He was dealing with similar resistance from his own people and radiating frustrated determination. The connection steadied me, reminding me that I wasn't facing these challenges alone. Harold, I said quietly, you've served this pack faithfully for 40 years, and I respect your experience. But questioning my judgment in front of the entire pack crosses into insubordination. Are you challenging my authority? The older wolf's face flushed, but he didn't back down. I'm saying that mating with the enemy might compromise your ability to lead objectively. And I'm saying that alliance with former enemies might be exactly what this pack needs to thrive in changing times. I stepped forward, letting my alpha authority fill the room. The old grudges nearly got us all killed. Elena Ravencrest counted on our isolation, on our refusal to work with potential allies. Would you rather cling to the past and watch this pack get destroyed, or adapt and help us build something stronger? Marcus spoke from the back of the room, his voice carrying quiet authority. Harold, I've stood beside Lyra through 6 years of leadership. Her judgment has kept us safe, prosperous, and independent when other packs have failed. If she says this alliance will strengthen us, I believe her. Other voices joined in, Sarah supporting the improved patrol coordination, Tom praising the tactical advantages of joint training exercises, newer pack members excited about expanded territory and resources. Gradually, I could see Harold's rigid opposition beginning to crack. Change is hard, I said more gently. I understand that. But refusing to change when circumstances require it isn't loyalty, it's stubbornness that puts everyone at risk. Harold stared at me for a long moment, then nodded curtly and sat down. It wasn't enthusiastic support, but it was acceptance, and that was enough for now. The meeting continued for another hour as we worked through the practical details of integration. Some issues were straightforward, combining patrol schedules, establishing communication protocols, coordinating response to external threats. Others were more complex, requiring delicate negotiation between groups that had spent decades viewing each other with suspicion. What about leadership hierarchy? Asked Janet, one of our mid-level enforcers. If Silverwood and Blackthorn are truly allied, who has final authority in joint operations? It was a fair question and one Damon and I had been wrestling with privately. Traditional pack structure was hierarchical, with a single alpha holding ultimate authority. But our situation was unprecedented. 2 equal alphas trying to lead coordinated operations without undermining each other. Situational leadership, I replied after a moment. Whichever alpha has more expertise or better territorial knowledge takes point on specific operations. But major decisions get made jointly. And if you disagree? I smiled, thinking of the heated discussion Damon and I had had just that morning about patrol routes. Then we argue it out like adults and find a compromise. Same as any other leadership challenge. The meeting finally wrapped up near midnight, with more questions answered than raised and a general sense that progress was being made. As pack members dispersed, Marcus approached with his usual post-meeting debriefing expression. "Better than last week," he observed. "Harold's still grumbling, but at least he's not actively sabotaging the integration efforts." "Small victories," I agreed. "How are the joint patrols actually working out?" "Surprisingly well, once people got past the initial awkwardness. Sarah says the Blackthorn trackers have techniques we can learn from, and Kane admitted our enforcers are better at crowd control than he expected."
Good.
"What about the territorial boundary adjustments?" "That's where it gets complicated." Marcus pulled out a map covered in colored markers. "The original boundaries made sense when we were separate packs, but now they're creating inefficiencies. Look, the River Patrol requires crossing pack lines 6 times, and the Eastern Territory has a gap that neither side has been covering properly." I studied the map, seeing what he meant. "We need to redraw the boundaries entirely." "Probably. But that's going to require council approval, not to mention buy-in from both packs. People get attached to territorial markers. People get attached to being alive more," I pointed out. "We'll figure it out." Marcus rolled up the map, his expression thoughtful. "You know, 3 weeks ago, I thought this alliance was the craziest thing you'd ever proposed. But watching it actually work, seeing how you and Blackthorn complement each other in leadership situations, it's impressive." "You sound surprised." "I am a little. Not that you two work well together. That was obvious from the start. But I'm surprised by how well our people are adapting. Change is usually harder for wolves."
He was right about that.
Supernatural creatures were generally resistant to change, preferring the comfort of established traditions and clear hierarchies. The fact that both packs were adjusting as well as they were spoke to their fundamental trust in their respective alphas. Speaking of adaptation, Marcus continued with a carefully neutral expression. "When exactly are you planning to make the mating bond public?" Heat flushed through my cheeks. "What makes you think?" "Lyra, you're wearing a ring that practically glows with magical energy. You keep touching your chest like you're feeling something the rest of us can't, and Blackthorn gets this specific look on his face whenever you're in danger. Either you've been secretly mated for weeks, or you're both having the same very vivid fantasy." I sighed, realizing there was no point in pretending anymore. "We exchanged rings last week. The bond is new." "New as in recently activated, or new as in still figuring out how it works?" "Both." I settled into one of the meeting chairs, suddenly exhausted by the weight of everything we were trying to balance. "Marcus, I have no idea what I'm doing. I've never been in a relationship like this, never tried to lead alongside someone else, never had to balance personal feelings with pack responsibilities on this scale. And it's terrifying and wonderful and completely overwhelming all at the same time." Marcus sat down across from me, his expression shifting from beta to friend. "You want some advice?" "Desperately. Stop trying to manage it like a tactical operation. You're both control freaks who are used to handling everything alone. But that's not how partnerships work, romantic or otherwise. Trust the bond, trust each other, and trust that your people are smart enough to adapt to their leaders being happy for once." The simple wisdom hit harder than any complex strategy session. When did you get so insightful about relationships? When I spent 5 years watching my best friend carry the weight of leadership alone and wondering when she'd finally let someone help her. The genuine affection in his voice made my throat tight. "Thank you for supporting this, for keeping the pack together while I figure everything out, for being exactly what I need in a beta. That's what family does." I was about to respond when my phone buzzed with a text from Damon. "Emergency at the eastern border. Meet me at coordinates I'm sending. Come armed." My blood chilled as I forwarded the message to Marcus. "Get everyone on high alert. Something's happening." 20 minutes later, I was racing through the forest toward the coordinates Damon had sent, my heart hammering with adrenaline and fear. The bond between us was sending mixed signals. He was focused and determined, but underneath that was a current of genuine concern that made my wolf pace nervously. I found him crouched behind a fallen tree with Kane and Nora, all three staring at something in the clearing beyond. When I slid into position beside them, I immediately understood their tension. The clearing was full of rogues, not the small, disorganized groups we'd been dealing with, but at least 20 wolves moving with military precision. They'd set up what looked like a temporary command post, complete with communications equipment and tactical gear that was far too sophisticated for ordinary criminals. "How long have they been here?" I whispered. "Hour, maybe two," Damon replied, his voice grim. "They're not just passing through. This is a staging area for something bigger." I studied the scene more carefully, noting the way the rogues were positioned and the equipment they deployed. This isn't random. Someone's coordinating this. That's what worries me. Elena's operation was supposed to be shut down. Maybe some of her people went independent, Kane suggested. Decided to continue the territorial seizure plan without official backing. It was possible, but something felt wrong about the whole situation. The rogues were too organized, too well-equipped, too confident in their occupation of what was technically neutral territory between our packs. "We need to know what they're planning," I said finally. "Agreed. But there are too many for a direct assault, and we don't know if this is their entire force or just an advance team." Damon was right. Charging in without better intelligence would be suicide. But letting them operate unopposed could be equally dangerous. "I'll get closer," I said, already shifting my weight to move. "See if I can overhear their communications." "Absolutely not." Damon's hand caught my arm, his grip firm but careful. "If they spot you, if they spot any of us, we're all dead. But I'm the best tracker here and the smallest target. It's too dangerous. Everything we've done lately has been dangerous." I met his amber eyes, seeing fear and protectiveness warring with tactical necessity. "This is what I do, Damon. Trust me." Through our bond, I could feel his reluctance and his pride in equal measure. Finally, he nodded. 15 minutes. If you're not back by then, we're coming after you."
Deal.
I melted into the forest with the fluid grace that had made me one of the best scouts in the region. The rogues had posted sentries, but they were watching for direct approaches, not for someone willing to spend 40 minutes working through the underbrush to reach their blind spot. What I overheard made my blood run cold. "Phase 2 begins at midnight," a voice I recognized as Colonel Harrison's was saying. "Both pack houses simultaneously, no survivors. The clients want this finished before the council can interfere again." "What about the alphas?" another voice asked. "Irrelevant. They'll be too busy trying to save their people to coordinate a defense. By dawn, both territories will be cleared for occupation." I'd heard enough. I began the careful retreat back to where Damon and his people were waiting, my mind racing with the implications of what I discovered. Someone had hired Harrison to finish what Elena had started, complete elimination of both our packs. But who? And why now, when we were stronger together than we'd ever been apart? I was so focused on those questions that I almost missed the subtle shift in the forest sounds around me. Almost, but not quite. The attack came from 3 directions simultaneously, rogues who'd been positioned as roving patrols, designed to catch exactly the kind of scouting mission I'd just attempted. I managed to take down 2 of them before the third got lucky with a clawed swipe that sent me tumbling down a steep slope. Pain exploded through my left shoulder as I hit the rocky ground, and I could taste blood in my mouth. Worse, I could hear more rogues crashing through the underbrush toward my location, drawn by the sounds of fighting. Through the bond, I felt Damon's sudden spike of alarm and determination. He was coming, bringing Kane and Nora with him, but they were at least 5 minutes away. I had to hold out for 5 minutes against unknown numbers of trained killers. Time to find out just how strong this partnership really was. Chapter 11. Pain lanced through my shoulder as I rolled behind a boulder, claws extended and senses hyper-alert. I could hear at least 6 rogues converging on my position, too many for a direct fight, especially injured. But I didn't have to win. I just had to survive until backup arrived. Through our bond, Damon's emotions hit me like a tidal wave, fear for my safety, rage at the rogues, and an almost feral determination to reach me. The intensity of it was staggering, and I realized that our new mating bond was amplifying everything he felt. Stay calm, I tried to project back. I'm okay. 5 minutes. I wasn't sure if he could receive specific thoughts, but his emotional state shifted slightly, still desperate to reach me, but more focused, more tactical. The first rogue rounded my boulder with military precision, assault rifle raised. These weren't random criminals, they were trained soldiers, and they weren't taking any chances with a wounded alpha. I waited until he was committed to his approach, then exploded from cover with everything I had. My claws raked across his throat before he could bring his weapon to bear, and I had his rifle in my hands before his body hit the ground. Contact! Someone shouted from the tree line. Alpha is armed. Bullets shredded the bark above my head as I dove for new cover. These rogues had no interest in taking me alive. Harrison wanted both alphas eliminated before midnight, and a wounded target was easier than a mobile one. The rifle was military grade, loaded with ammunition designed to take down supernatural targets. I'd never been much of a marksman, but at close range against multiple opponents, precision mattered less than volume of fire. I popped up long enough to spray bullets at the muzzle flashes in the tree line, then dropped back as return fire chipped stone fragments from my boulder shelter. 2 minutes down, 3 to go. She's behind the large boulder. A voice called from my left. Flank her from the ravine side. They were coordinating, using military tactics that suggested extensive training. But they were also making the same mistake most humans made when fighting supernatural opponents. They were thinking like humans instead of predators. I stripped off my jacket and shirt, ignoring the cold bite of evening air against my skin. The partial shift was always risky in combat, but it would give me advantages they couldn't counter with technology alone. My bones lengthened and muscles expanded as I allowed my wolf nature to surface. Not a full shift. That would leave me naked and vulnerable when it ended, but enough to enhance my speed, strength, and senses beyond human limits. The scent trails became crystal clear, 6 rogues, all moving to surround my position. But one of them had gotten careless, approaching downwind where I could track his exact location. I waited until he was 8 feet away, then launched myself over the boulder in a trajectory he couldn't possibly have anticipated. We went down in a tangle of claws and gunfire, but I had the advantage of supernatural strength and absolutely nothing to lose. When I rolled away from his motionless body, I had another rifle and a growing reputation among the remaining rogues. Jesus Christ, what is she? Target is enhanced. Repeat, target is enhanced and extremely dangerous. 4 down, 2 to go. But my shoulder was bleeding freely now, and the partial shift was taking its toll on my energy reserves. I needed Damon to arrive soon, or this was going to end badly. As if summoned by my desperation, the forest erupted with howls that made my heart soar. Damon was coming, and he wasn't coming alone. Those were pack calls, Silverwood and Blackthorn wolves working together, coordinating their approach like the trained unit they were becoming. The remaining rogues heard it too, and their confident military precision cracked into something closer to panic. Abort mission, one of them called. Too many hostiles inbound. Negative. Primary target is wounded and contained. Finish the job. But it was too late for finishing anything. Damon burst from the tree line like an avenging angel, his wolf form magnificent and terrifying in the dying light. Behind him came Cain, Nora, Marcus, and Sarah, 5 of the most dangerous predators in the state, working as a coordinated hunting pack. The rogues never had a chance. 10 minutes later, I was sitting on a fallen log while Sarah cleaned and bandaged my shoulder, surrounded by the aftermath of what had been a very one-sided battle. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind bone-deep exhaustion and the kind of shakiness that came after narrowly avoiding death. "You're an idiot," Damon said conversationally, but his hands were gentle as he checked my injuries. "A brave, magnificent idiot who scared 10 years off my life." "I got the intelligence we needed," I pointed out. "Harrison's planning simultaneous attacks on both pack houses at midnight. No survivors." "Christ." Marcus looked up from the communications equipment he'd been examining. "How many people does he have?" I couldn't get an exact count, but more than the group we just eliminated. And they're well-funded, well-armed, and operating under orders to finish what Elena started. From who? Kane asked the question we were all thinking. I don't know. But whoever it is, they want our territories badly enough to fund a small army. Damon helped me to my feet, his arms sliding around my waist with protective care. We need to get our people to safety. Evacuate the pack houses. Establish defensive positions in locations they don't know about. Agreed. But we also need to know who's paying Harrison's bills, I said. This won't end until we cut off the source. Sarah looked up from packing her medical supplies. I might have an idea about that. When I was tracking the money flows for Elena's operation, I found some irregularities in the council's financial records. Payments that didn't match official budgets, funds that seemed to disappear into private accounts. Someone else on the council is involved? The possibility made my stomach turn. If we couldn't trust the governing body of our people, then nowhere was safe.
Maybe.
Or maybe someone's using council resources without authorization. Either way, there's more to this than just Elena's personal vendetta. We made it back to Silverwood territory in record time, but I could see the tension in every pack member's face as we explained the situation. Evacuation plans that had been theoretical exercises suddenly became urgent necessities. Safe houses are prepared, Marcus reported as our people efficiently packed essential supplies and prepared to abandon the only home most of them had ever known. Food, medical supplies, communications equipment. We can hold out for weeks if necessary. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. I watched families loading vehicles with their most precious possessions, my heart aching for what this was costing them. Any word from Blackthorn Pack? Already evacuated, Damon confirmed, ending a call with Kane. They're using the old mining complex 20 miles north. Defensible position, multiple escape routes, and far enough from any known staging areas to buy us time.
Good.
What about the pack house itself? Booby-trapped and wired for surveillance. If Harrison's people want it, they can have it, but we'll know exactly when and how many. It was a sound strategy, but leaving behind the place where I'd grown up, where my father had led before me, felt like abandoning part of my soul. The pack house held decades of memories, traditions, and the accumulated history of Silverwood Pack. Hey. Damon appeared beside me as I stood in main hall, looking around at the empty rooms that had once hummed with pack life. It's just a building.
No, it's not.
My voice was rougher than I'd intended. This is where my father taught me to lead, where pack meetings have been held for 60 years, where you'll come back and create new memories once this is over. His arms came around me from behind, solid and warm and infinitely comforting. Buildings can be repaired, Lyra. People can't be replaced. He was right, of course. But knowing that didn't make the loss any easier to bear. You ready? Marcus appeared in the doorway, the last of our people loaded and waiting. I took one final look around the hall where so much of my life had unfolded, then nodded. Ready. The evacuation convoy moved through the forest like a midnight migration, vehicles and wolves on foot flowing along paths that had been scouted and prepared for exactly this scenario. By the time Harrison's people reached our territory, they'd find empty buildings and no targets for their violence. But as we settled into the cramped quarters of our temporary refuge, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something crucial. Harrison was a mercenary, effective, but ultimately just a tool. Someone else was pulling the strings, and until we identified them, this cycle of attacks and evacuations would continue indefinitely. Can't sleep? Damon asked softly. We were sharing a small cabin with Marcus and Sarah, privacy a luxury we couldn't afford in our current situation. Too much to think about. I was lying on a narrow cot, staring at the ceiling and listening to the quiet sounds of our people settling in around us. We're reactive instead of proactive, always responding to threats instead of eliminating them. What do you want to do about it? I turned to face him, seeing the same restless energy in his amber eyes. I want to find whoever's funding this operation and end it permanently. No more running, no more evacuations, no more living in fear. That's going to be dangerous. More dangerous than anything we've done so far. I know. I reached across the narrow space between our cots to take his hand. but I'm tired of being hunted. It's time to become the hunters. Through our bond, I felt his approval and determination mixing with protective concern. Whatever came next, we'd face it together, as partners, as mates, as leaders who refused to let anyone destroy what we'd built. But first, we had to survive the night. Outside our small refuge, I could hear the forest settling into its nocturnal rhythms. Somewhere out there, Harrison's people were discovering empty pack houses and realizing their carefully planned assault had failed. They'd regroup, reassess, and come at us again. When they did, we'd be ready. Chapter 12. Dawn brought news that confirmed our worst fears and our best hopes in equal measure. Both pack houses hit at exactly midnight, Kane reported as our leadership teams gathered in the main cabin. Coordinated assault, military precision, overwhelming force. If we'd been there, we'd all be dead, I finished grimly. What about casualties on their side? Several wounded by the booby traps, but no fatalities. They were prepared for defensive measures. Kane spread out photos taken by our surveillance cameras. But they weren't prepared for this. The images showed Harrison's forces in full tactical gear, moving through our empty buildings with the frustrated efficiency of soldiers who just discovered their mission was pointless. More importantly, they showed faces we could identify and vehicles we could track. Facial recognition is running now, Nora added, her laptop connected to databases that Sarah's technical skills had made accessible. We should have identities within the hour.
Good.
What about tracking the money? I asked. Sarah looked up from her own computer, excitement bright in her eyes. I think I've found our puppet master. The payments to Harrison's organization trace back through 3 shell companies, but the ultimate source is interesting. She turned her laptop screen toward us, displaying a complex web of financial transfers and corporate entities. Ravencrest Holdings was just the tip of the iceberg. The real money is coming from something called Northern Acquisitions, LLC. Never heard of it, Damon said, but his expression was troubled. Neither had I, until I started digging deeper. Northern Acquisitions is owned by a consortium of investors, all of them connected to pack territories that have been acquired through council intervention in the past 5 years. Understanding dawned like a cold sunrise. It's not just Elena. There's a whole network of people who've been profiting from pack dissolutions.
Exactly.
And according to the financial records, they've been planning this for months. Elena's exposure was supposed to be a temporary setback, not the end of the operation. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. So, even with Elena gone, the people funding this won't give up. They've invested too much to walk away now. Which means Harrison's failure last night will just make them more desperate, Damon observed. They'll escalate. As if summoned by his words, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, then noticed the prefix. It was local, probably someone calling from our own territory. Sterling, I answered cautiously. Alpha Sterling. The voice was cultured, male, and completely unfamiliar. My name is David Morrison. I represent certain interests who would like to resolve this situation peacefully. I put the phone on speaker and gestured for silence from the others. What kind of interests, Mr. Morrison? The kind that prefer negotiation to bloodshed. My clients are prepared to offer you and Alpha Blackthorn a very generous settlement in exchange for voluntary relocation. Relocation. New territories, far from here. Fully established packlands with excellent hunting and no hostile neighbors. Think of it as a fresh start, away from all this unpleasantness. The casual way he discussed stealing our ancestral lands made my wolf snarl with rage. And if we refuse? Then I'm afraid the unpleasantness will continue to escalate. My clients have significant resources and very little patience. Last night was just a demonstration of capabilities. Damon leaned forward, his voice deadly calm. Who are your clients, Morrison? People who understand that the old ways of pack management are inefficient and counterproductive. The future belongs to consolidated territories under professional management. Professional management? I repeated. You mean corporate ownership of pack lands? I mean modernization, Alpha Sterling. Supernatural territories managed like any other valuable resource, with proper oversight and strategic development. Your little alliance experiment has been charming, but it's time to let adults handle things. The condescension in his voice made my teeth ache. These people didn't just want our territory. They wanted to fundamentally change how supernatural communities operated, turning ancient pact bonds into corporate assets. Counteroffer, Damon said pleasantly. You and your clients can go to hell, and we'll consider not hunting you down for what you've already done to our people. Morrison's chuckle was cold as winter. I expected as much. Very well. You have 24 hours to reconsider. After that, Colonel Harrison has authorization to use whatever methods he deems necessary. The line went dead, leaving us in tense silence. Corporate ownership of pact territories, Sarah said finally. That's what this has been about from the beginning. Elena wasn't just consolidating power. She was setting up a system that would let human investors treat our lands like any other commodity. Genocide with a profit motive, Marcus said grimly. Destroy the pact bonds that make territories sacred, then buy and sell the land like any other real estate. It was a nightmare scenario that went far beyond simple territorial disputes. These people wanted to fundamentally restructure supernatural society, treating our most sacred bonds and traditions as obstacles to efficient resource management. We have to stop this, I said. Not just for our pacts, but for every supernatural community on the continent. If they succeed here, they'll replicate the model everywhere, Damon finished. Within a decade, pact lands will be owned by human corporations and managed by people who see us as exotic livestock. Nora looked up from her laptop, her face pale. I've got identities on most of Harrison's people. But there's something else. These aren't ordinary mercenaries, they're former military personnel who've been specifically trained for supernatural conflict. She turned the screen toward us, showing personnel files that made my blood run cold. Enhanced weapons, specialized tactics, even chemical compounds designed to disrupt shapeshifting. Someone's been preparing for this kind of operation for years. How do we fight that?
Kane asked.
They've got better equipment, better training, and unlimited funding. We've got something they don't, I said, an idea beginning to form. We've got the truth, and we've got allies they don't know about. Damon caught on immediately. Alexander Nightshade. And through him, every pack leader who's been threatened by this consolidation push.
Exactly.
Morrison and his clients have been operating in secret, picking off isolated packs one at a time. But if we can expose the whole network, we turn it from a secret corporate acquisition into a very public war, Sarah finished. One they can't win without revealing the extent of their operations. It was risky. Going public meant exposing supernatural politics to human scrutiny in ways that could have long-term consequences. But the alternative was systematic destruction of our entire way of life. I'll call Alexander, Damon said, already reaching for his phone. If anyone can coordinate a response at that level, it's him. I'll work on documenting everything we've discovered, Sarah added. Financial records, personnel files, communication intercepts. We'll need ironclad evidence if we're going public. What about our people? Marcus asked. This safe house won't stay secret forever, and if Harrison escalates. We don't wait for him to escalate, I said, the plan crystallizing in my mind. We take the fight to them. Hit their command structure, disrupt their operations, force them into the open where they can't operate in secret. That's suicide, Kane protested. They're expecting us to strike back. They're expecting us to strike back defensively, I corrected. Protect our people, defend our territory, play by the same rules we always have. They're not expecting us to go after their leadership directly. Through our bond, I could feel Damon's excitement and approval mixing with protective concern. It could work, but it would have to be surgical. Get in, eliminate the command structure, and get out before they can coordinate a response. High risk, high reward, Marcus observed. If we succeed, we end this permanently. If we fail fighting instead of hiding, I said firmly. Our people deserve leaders who are willing to take risks to protect them. The next 6 hours were a whirlwind of preparation and coordination. Alexander Nightshade didn't just agree to help. He mobilized a coalition of pack leaders who'd been quietly resisting council consolidation efforts for years. By evening, we had commitments from 12 different territories, representing over 3,000 wolves who were ready to fight for their independence. Sarah's documentation efforts had uncovered the full scope of Northern Acquisition's operations, 17 packed territories already absorbed, 43 more targeted for acquisition, and a timeline that would have completed corporate ownership of most supernatural lands within 5 years. Morrison's holed up in a hotel downtown, Nora reported as we finalized our strike plans. Presidential suite, 2 floors of security, and Harrison's best people on guard duty. What about extraction routes? Damon asked. Limited. Buildings only got 2 stairwells and service elevators that can be locked down remotely. If we go in, we better be sure we can finish the job quickly. It was a trap, obviously. Morrison and his people knew we'd come for them eventually, and they'd chosen their fortress accordingly. But sometimes walking into a trap was the only way to spring the bigger trap you'd prepared. Teams? I asked. You and me for Morrison, Damon said. Marcus and Kane for Harrison. Sarah and Nora for technical support and extraction coordination. And if things go wrong? #RivalHearts. The end.